What the hell is with this tone? It's as if he's saying that his girlfriend is throwing a tantrum. My highly revered and immortal boss throws tantrums? The little secretary felt as though her view on life just came crashing down. Time crawled by, and just like that, Yuanwan had waited outside the boardroom for almost 2 hours. The little secretary stretched her neck to glimpse into the meeting room from time to time and looked somewhat embarrassed. Mr. Su mentioned just now that the meeting would be ending soon. Why is it taking so long? Sorry, Mr. Yi. They probably had some problems in the meeting. The boss isn't really throwing a tantrum, is he? After all, he actually ended the meeting earlier last time. It's fine. Your work's more important. Go and do your own things. You don't have to accompany me here, Yuanwan said good-naturedly. The little secretary did have a stack of work to complete. She left reluctantly. At the same time, in the meeting room, according to the schedule, the meeting should have ended way earlier. She wasn't sure why it was taking so long. Yuanwan looked at the darkening sky, then glanced through the door at the never-ending meeting. Yuanwan couldn't take it any longer and decided to send a text to Si Han. What time will you be done? She was sure she saw Si Han glance at his phone while listening to his subordinate's report. However, he read the message and looked up without reacting to it. All Yuanwan could do was keep waiting. After some time, the meeting still hadn't ended, so she sent another text. Still not done? After sending so many text messages and not getting a reply, Yuanwan laid on the table and typed on her phone sluggishly. The cabbages I bought are almost rotten. When the sky was almost completely dark, Si Han finally walked out of the meeting room. The senior management was tortured so badly that they didn't even linger to gossip and dispersed immediately once they were out. They ran away faster than rabbits. Only Sui had the courage to follow behind. Si Han strode forward with his long legs and didn't glance sideways at all. At the same time, he instructed Sui, book the next flight to Paris. Sui carefully glimpsed sideways at Yuanwan waiting at the side and didn't dare to delay. He quickly replied, "Yes, I'll do it right away." Hearing his footsteps, Yuanwan saw that Si Han had finally come out, so she immediately stood up, but the next instant, she heard Si Han would be going overseas. Yuanwan was stunned. She wanted to speak, but then a crash resounded. Since she stood up too quickly, everything in the big bag she was brought fell to the ground. There were vegetables, meat, and ingredients for preparing a steamboat. Aside from this, there was also some toothbrush, towels, and daily necessities, probably items she prepared for her move to the dormitory. After seeing the items on the ground, Si Han's expression became much colder. However, in the next second, he noticed that the daily necessities Yuanwan prepared, toothbrush, towel, bathrobe, and slippers, were all in pairs. One set was in pink and the other set was in blue. Furthermore, they were all the brands he usually used. She probably got the servants at Jean Garden to prepare them for her. After he saw those sets of daily necessities, Si Han's face changed and he stopped in his tracks. Yuanwan bent down and picked up the things one by one. After that, she lifted her little face and mumbled, "Are you going overseas? I found a job, and I was planning to celebrate with you." The man pursed his lips and replied expressionlessly, "No, Sui's going." "Sui, huh? Aren't you going?" Yuanwan's worried little face brightened up instantly. "No," a certain someone replied, without a change in expression. Sui was totally dumbfounded. "Master, how could you do this? Since when was I going overseas? Aren't you the one who's going? Have you forgotten that you just approved my annual leave today?" Sui already somehow understood Yuanwan's situation. Although his master agreed to let her roam freely outside, his intention was to let her suffer for a bit, then she would return to him out of her own volition. Who knew that since his master let her out, not only did she not encounter any difficulties, she even thrived outside, becoming more and more out of his control. She would seize any opportunity to hide further and further away. So how could his master not be mad? He initially thought that his master's fury would last longer this time, but it turned out this woman didn't plan on moving out herself. She even wanted to bring his master along. In the end, a certain housekeeper watched with a tear-stained face as a certain boss of his, who was supposed to be flying to Paris, followed Yuanwan to their new place. Just like that, He was forced to go overseas instead. Grandview Park. This is the place. Yi Wanwan opened the door, turned on the lights, and gave Si Han a pair of slippers. Si Han scanned the interior of the place with his icy gaze. He then saw the boxes Yi Wanwan stacked against the wall, and his dark eyes grew dimmer. Yi Wanwan didn't bring many things over, obviously just treating this place as a temporary spot for the convenience of her work. But instead, she prepared quite a few items for him. He had everything he needed there. Even the slippers on his feet were the same ones he had at Jean Garden. Yi Wanwan brought the ingredients to the kitchen and mumbled, "Actually, this dorm isn't bad, but I was worried that you wouldn't be used to living here. So I got the servants at home to prepare a set of things you usually use." "Oh, I considered even bringing Great White along to play, but I was afraid it would frighten everyone. Thankfully, I won't be staying here often unless duty calls." "Oh right, baby, do you eat that?" Yi Wanwan was busy washing the vegetables when all of a sudden, something tightened around her waist, and in the next second, she was forced into a warm embrace. At that moment, that familiar, distinct cool breath overpowered her and assaulted all her senses. Being hugged by him from the back without warning, Yi Wanwan blinked and stopped what she was doing. "What's wrong?" Behind her, he didn't say a word as he tightened his grip around her, planting cold kisses on her ear, her neck. Ding! Just at that moment, the doorbell suddenly rang. Yi Wanwan hurriedly turned her head and said, "There's someone at the door." The gloominess in Si Han's eyes bubbled up, obviously unhappy at being interrupted. "Be good. I'll go see who it is. It might be someone from the company." Today was her first day moving in, so only the company knew she was here. Did Chu Hongguang send someone over? Si Han rarely revealed his face outside, so nobody knew who he was. It wouldn't be a problem even if someone saw him. Thus, Yi Wanwan wasn't worried at all. After calming Si Han down, Yi Wanwan went to get the door. Coming, Yi Wanwan pulled open the door. The moment she opened the door, all she saw was that dazzling face, and Yi Wanwan was taken aback. "Han Xianyu? Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon." Yi Wanwan saw Han Xianyu suddenly at her door with various plastic bags in his hands, and came to her senses only after being in a long shock. She said with a startled expression, I heard from Yang Ji that you just moved next door, so I came over to visit." Han Xianyu replied politely. Yi Wanwan then immediately glanced in the direction of the room next to hers. "You live here?" Han Xianyu replied helplessly. "At first, I was living at the villa in East City District, but as you know, due to the recent incident, all my private addresses were leaked, so I'm staying here for the time being." Only then did Yi Wanwan understand clearly. "I see." Yi Wanwan looked at Han Xianyu as she finished speaking. He was wearing a pair of jeans, a black leather jacket over a printed top, and a pair of white sneakers. He had an arrow-shaped silver stud in his left ear, and his short brown hair was slightly messy. It was a very casual look. He looked free and easy, yet handsome. Since he had remarkable looks and was always in front of the camera, just the image of him simply standing there was picture-perfect. However, the most attractive part of him was his pair of eyes gleaming like two clusters of flames. Compared to that sallow and gloomy look she saw the other day in the worldwide conference room, the Han Xianyu at this moment looked so much better. The impression she had of Han Xianyu in her head was that he could send his fans screaming but would also be humble enough to bend over backwards to help the elderly. He drove a red Ferrari and sped down the street, but also fed the stray cats on the streets. He seemed to be unruly and cool on the outside, but he was kind and soft-hearted on the inside. He was as free as the wind, dazzling like there was a sun shining fiercely over him, and could infect everyone around him with his enthusiasm and kindness. This was the true Han Xianyu. In her past life, she liked this artist, Han Xianyu, also because she was moved by his zeal and carefree attitude. And because he was so perfect, it was a great pity when he fell from grace in her previous life. Thankfully, in this life, this bright star was still sparkling brightly. Han Xianyu felt his heart inexplicably tense up by the stare from that pair of watery eyes. He coughed lightly and said, "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Yi Wanwan quickly regained her senses and responded, No, of course not. Quick, come in." Such a coincidence that Han Xianyu was her neighbor, and he even came to visit. Si Han's still inside though, what should I do? But Han Xianyu's carrying so many things and he came over personally to pay me a visit. I can't just reject him, right? Yuanwan didn't have any other choice but to let him in. Thankfully, she was dressed as a man right now, so it was very safe. On the other hand, Han Xianyu had just entered when he saw someone sitting on the sofa. He was stunned. Purely because that man's look and temperament were too eye-catching. He had always been very confident about his looks. Whenever he posted a photo of himself, there would be countless fans who lauded praise on him, but compared to this man before him, he was suddenly much dimmer. If Xianyu was handsome, this man could disrupt a country. This is? Han Xianyu asked subconsciously. This is my friend, Si. Ninth Si. Yuanwan gave a simple introduction, then looked at Si Han nervously and said, Aju, this is Han Xianyu. He's a very famous actor, and I've told you about him before. Yuanwan swallowed her saliva after speaking and prayed in her heart that Si Han wouldn't explode. A second went by, 2 seconds went by, 3 seconds went by. Si Han's cold gaze paused at Han Xianyu for a brief moment before he finally said without expression, Hey. Han Xianyu nodded slightly. Hi. This guy's aura is too intimidating. The way he looks at me makes me shudder. Han Xianyu looked at Yuanwan and probed, Your friend. Is someone in the industry as well? Seeing that Si Han didn't explode, Yuanwan heaved a sigh of relief and replied, No, he's not. He's a businessman. Han Xianyu nodded as if everything made sense. If he was someone in the industry, he would have been explosively popular with his dashing appearance. There was no way he hadn't seen him before. Yuanwan tried to be hospitable to her guest, Han Xianyu, and said, Make yourself at home. I just moved here today, so everything's still unpacked. It's a little messy around here. What would you like to drink? I think I have plain water, and I'll check if I have any tea leaves. Han Xianyu hurriedly said, You don't have to trouble yourself. Plain water's fine. You did a great favor for me, and I haven't had the chance to thank you yet. I was planning to treat you to a meal tonight, but you seem to have a guest. Yuanwan poured a glass of water for him. Mr. Han, you're too polite. I already mentioned before that you don't have to thank me. I know, but Chairman Chu is Chairman Chu and I am me. It's different. If it wasn't for you, I'm sure things would have turned out very differently. Han Xianyu concealed the shadows in his eyes. His gaze turned warmer when he looked at the teenager as he smiled. I've been thinking about how to thank you, but I haven't thought of a suitable way that wouldn't be too unobtrusive. How about I introduce a girlfriend to you? Yuanwan nearly stumbled and dropped the glass in her hands. She anxiously turned to look at a certain someone sitting on the sofa and quickly rejected the offer. No thanks. I've got a girlfriend already. And that person is sitting right there. All right. Han Xianyu thought to himself, he has a girlfriend already? Could it be that woman over the phone the other night? I see, all right then. Let me know when you're free. I must treat you to dinner. Han Xianyu was very firm on that. Even though was dressed as a man right now, if Yuanwan agreed to another man's invitation in front of Si Han, she'd still be courting death. As expected, when she took a glance at Si Han, she noticed his face had changed the moment Han Xianyu offered to introduce a girlfriend to her. However, Han Xianyu was very firm about it, so it was really hard to reject him, just as Yuanwan felt stuck in this difficult situation. Si Han actually replied graciously, Mr. Han, you should stay and eat with us. Hearing Si Han's words, Yuanwan was simply overwhelmed with her own brilliance. My idea of dressing up as a man was indeed a brilliant one. Si Han is so easygoing now. It's unbelievable. Yuanwan heaved a sigh of relief. She looked at Han Xianyu and said, You really don't have to take me out. How about this? My friend's here to visit, and we're preparing to have hot pot at home. If you don't mind, why don't you join us? Han Xianyu didn't mind at all. Sure, it's more convenient at home anyway, but shouldn't I be the one treating you? We're all brothers. We don't have to be so calculative with one another. Don't be wishy-washy. It's settled. I'll go prepare the veggies. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. As Si Han's phone suddenly rang, He stood up and walked to the balcony to take the call. Han Xianyu didn't have the air of an entitled superstar. He felt embarrassed he wasn't doing anything to help, so he headed to the kitchen to lend Yuanwan a hand. But what he saw was the teenager's sleeves casually rolled up with the water flowing on his frosty white skin. Han Xianyu felt lost in another world. This Yibai, not only does he have the looks, even his figure is more stunning than a woman's. This kind of guy who looked better than most women was very trendy the past few years in the entertainment industry. Fresh meat in the industry usually brought shame to many women. There were some guys like this by his side already, but none of them was like Yibai. Those deliberately manufactured and so-called pretty boys were like fake plastic flowers. Their behavior and actions were all pretentious, but Yibai was like an oasis in the desert of an unbroken chain of dunes, her ingeniousness and willfulness able to blow out the fires of the world. Han Xianyu caught himself staring in a daze at that man. He quickly shook his head and returned to his senses and said, "Let me help you." After speaking, he took the vegetables by the side, started washing them and said, "Mr. Yi, I heard you signed on to Worldwide? Don't keep calling me Mr. Yi. It sounds so awkward. Just call me by my name." Yi Wanwan didn't bother hiding the truth and replied honestly, "Yes, I did sign with Worldwide and completed the agreement with Chairman Chu today." Han Xianyu always wondered what conditions Yibai discussed with Chairman Chu previously, so it was a chance to work with Worldwide. Only looking at Yibai's exceptional personality and appearance, he would make a great artiste, but with his competence, it wasn't strange that he'd chosen to be a manager. Han Xianyu that it even suited him better. "Mr. Y. Yibai, which company are you going to work with?" Han Xianyu asked. "Dazzling Media," Yi Wanwan replied. Hearing these two words, Dazzling Media, Han Xianyu's brows raised slightly. However, it wasn't surprising when he thought about it. He sneered. Chairman Chu doesn't trust anyone easily, so he wouldn't allow you to enter headquarters so easily. But it's also better this way. The headquarters and stronger subsidiaries are basically saturated with people already, and they all have their respective social circles and networks. Without qualifications or a strong network, it'd be too difficult for you to enter those companies at a mid-level position. There's only Zhou Wenbin working at Dazzling today, so by starting there, it'll be much easier for you. I thought so too, Yi Wanwan nodded. Considering that she had to start working at Dazzling the next day, she tried probing further. "Oh right, what's Zhou Wenbin like? He seems to have a good character from what I heard." As she paid a bit of attention to the artist managed by him, Gong Su, she knew a little about Zhou Wenbin as well. Gong Su was infamous for his bad temper. He was also reported as being hard to please and big-headed. Although he was just as qualified as Han Xianyu, he had too many scandals and bad records that he was unable to surpass Han Xianyu and had countless managers before Zhou Wenbin. Only Zhou Wenbin was able to handle him. Usually, in front the public eye, Zhou Wenbin acted like a gentleman and was kind towards others. Once Yi Wanwan mentioned the name Zhou Wenbin, Han Xianyu's face turned cold. Tisk, he's just faking it for the media and public. Everyone in the industry knows what kind of man he is. Anyway, he's definitely not who you think he is. Be very cautious when you have dealings with him in case he tries to get you into trouble. Yi Wanwan nodded gratefully. Thanks for the advice. I'll be careful. If Han Xianyu dared to speak the truth to me like that, it means he really doesn't see me as an outsider. When Si Han was done with his phone call and returned, he saw Yi Wanwan and Han Xianyu having a nice chat while washing the vegetables in the kitchen. There was a kind of relaxation and genuineness on the girl's face as she looked at Han Xianyu. The kind that never appeared when she looked at him. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. The three of them sat around the table. Han Xianyu sat at one side while Yi Wanwan and Si Han sat opposite. Han Xianyu felt like something was amiss and said, "Do you guys want some wine? I have a bottle of exquisite wine at my place." Yi Wanwan knew Si Han didn't like her drinking. She subconsciously glanced at Si Han and replied, "Sorry, I don't drink. How about the two of you go ahead?" Han Xianyu was a little disappointed, but he didn't force Yi Wanwan and turned to the man sitting opposite and asked, "Mr. Si, can you hold your liquor well?" Si Han seemed distracted with a thin layer of frost covering his face and seemed somewhat distant as he replied plainly, "I'm not bad." Sure, I'll go get the wine. The two of us shall drink. Han Xianyu returned with a bottle of red wine very quickly. This bottle of Romani Conti was gifted by my friend from France. It's really hard to get. I've been reluctant to open it since he gave it to me. Yi Bai, you really don't want some? Anyway, you're at home. It's fine even if you get drunk. Han Xianyu tried persuading her. Yi Wanwan sighed. My girlfriend doesn't really like me drinking. Han Xianyu broke into laughter. She's so strict? She's not even here now. You're so obedient. Yi Wanwan, problem is that she's right here, right now. Okay. Han Xianyu teased her before the three of them started chatting, drinking, and eating hot pot. Although it was indeed a little weird to have red wine paired with hot pot, what was important was the atmosphere, and the three of them didn't seem to mind at all. During the meal, most of the talking was done by Han Xianyu and Yi Bai. The person next to Yi Bai had very little to say and didn't eat much as well. He drank most of the time and only ate when Yi Bai placed some dishes in his bowl. The man twirled the glass of red wine lightly with his slender fingers. Judging by his actions, Han Xianyu felt this friend of Yi Bai's didn't come from a simple background and had a high status. His movements could only be formed if he had mixed in environments of nobility for a long time. It was a big difference compared to artistes who were specially trained to act this way in front of the public. The man's other arm rested naturally on the backrest of Yi Bai's chair. Only Yi Bai and Han Xianyu conversed the whole time. The man didn't say a single word, yet there was an inexplicable feeling hovering between the man and Yi Bai, a kind of feeling that outsiders would never be able to replicate. Aju, eat some more. Why do you only keep drinking? Han Xianyu, why are you also eating so little? Yi Wanwan, whose head was buried in her bowl and ate nonstop, realized that she seemed to be the only one eating. Si Han didn't even take any food for himself, while Han Xianyu only had a few pieces of vegetables. Han Xianyu replied helplessly, everyone working in the industry is like this. We have to watch our diet. Yi Wanwan suddenly rejoiced for choosing to be a manager instead. Your job's not easy at all. You can't even eat your fill. Han Xianyu shrugged. No choice. Everyone says you look 5 kilograms fatter on screen. If you want to look good on television, you have to be skinnier than the average person. Those skinny artistes that people usually see on television are actually as skinny as twigs in real life. Yi Wanwan nodded continuously. You're like that too. Still dieting when you're already so skinny. The two of them were chatting away when someone's phone suddenly rang. It was Si Yi Han's phone. Si Yi Han placed his glass of wine down and raised the phone to his ear. Hello? Si Yi Han didn't speak for a while. After listening to the caller for a bit, he replied in a low and hoarse voice, call Director Jiang to head over first. I'll be there soon. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. Yi Wanwan stared at Si Yi Han, nibbling at her food until he hung up. You're leaving? I have to deal with some issues. Si Yi Han stood up. Oh, work's more important. You should get going. Yi Wanwan stood up, grabbed Si Yi Han's coat, and prepared to send him off. Han Xianyu also stood up and followed behind to send him off. He drank quite a bit. Can he drive? Is the driver around? Yi Wanwan asked. Si Yi Han. Yes. Yi Wanwan was relieved and passed his coat to him. Stay safe on the roads. Although he drank quite a bit, Si Yi Han didn't look any different from normal and seemed very sober. That not bad comment about his capacity for liquor was a little too humble. Upon hearing Yi Wanwan's nagging, Si Yi Han took the coat without a word and fastened the buttons on his suit one by one. Then he simply replied, you drank quite a bit today. Get someone to make you some soup to sober up when you get home. Yi Wanwan said as she pushed the door open. Si Yi Han stared at her and didn't say anything. He lowered his head to fasten the last button, and under everyone's gaze, he pinched Yi Bai's chin with his long and slender fingers, then bent down and planted a kiss on his lips. After that, he said, all right, Yi Wanwan, Han Xianyu. After she recovered from what just happened, a resounding blast occurred in Yi Wanwan's head, and Han Xianyu looked as if he had just been struck by lightning. What just happened? The blast in Yi Wanwan's head was earth-shattering. She was so anxious that her soul nearly spilled out of her body. She couldn't believe the perpetrator simply kissed her, pushed the door open, and left her in this mess. After a whole 10 seconds, Yu Wanwan finally regained her senses and turned to look stiffly at Han Xianyu. Han Xianyu, let me explain. Si Han was incredibly calm that night, which allowed her to lower her guard, thinking all was well as long as she dressed as a man. It never occurred to her that he would catch her off guard and ruin everything with that move. She was on the verge of going crazy. How could she explain this to Han Xianyu? My friend's an American-born Chinese. He grew up overseas, so he's more open-minded and likes to joke around. Ha ha ha. She actually used Suyi's explanation back from the office the other day in the heat of the moment. Damn it. What comes around really goes around. As for Han Xianyu's reaction to this explanation, more open-minded? Likes to joke around? You sure? Your friend's obviously not the jovial type. Even if he is, kissing another man before leaving isn't really considered a joke, is it? Yu Wanwan knew her explanation was quite ridiculous, but she could only muster up her courage and continue. He's like that whenever he's drunk. He likes to joke, and sometimes I'll even call him baby. There were 2 guys in my dorm before who kept hugging each other in order to attract girls' attention. One big group of men pouncing on one another, even crazier than gay guys. It was really hard to watch. Han Xianyu listened to Yu Wanwan as she went on this rant with a straight face. He was convinced. He thought Yu Wanwan's explanation was logical, but also felt like something wasn't right somewhere. Oh, I see. Yu Wanwan immediately replied, Of course I'm a straight guy. I have a girlfriend. Han Xianyu looked sideways at Yi Bai and swallowed the words on the tip of his tongue. Even if you're straight, that friend of yours doesn't really look like he is. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. Early morning at Dazzling Media office. The office at the end of the top floor had a very lavish interior. There were a few medieval oil paintings and a vintage animal horn hung on the wall, and a gorgeous enamel flower vase on the table reflected the splendor of the sun's rays. Zhou Bin had a cup of black coffee in his hand and lay comfortably on his genuine leather sofa, looking very content. The man donned a custom-made Armani suit and wore a limited edition Patek Philippe watch on his wrist. His hair was neat and shiny. Even though he was already past middle age, over 40 years old, he maintained his image well and looked to be in his early 30s at most. At this moment, there was someone sitting opposite Zhou Bin. He had on a slightly old white t-shirt and washed jeans, simple black hair, and a clean face without any makeup. His back faced the sun. In the shadows, you could see his immaculate face, delicately carved out by the creator. But his eyes were dim. His thin lips were pale, and a cold aura emanated from his entire being. Zhou Bin took a leisurely sip of his coffee and looked straight into the other guy's eyes with determination. Luo Qin, what do you think? Have you decided? Luo Qin's figure was unusually frail, but his back was upright. When he heard this, his stiff back shuddered slightly and his eyes were ice-cold, but very quickly, that cold light was engulfed by the gloominess in his eyes, revealing desperation and defeat. At this moment, there was a dong dong dong. Someone knocked on the door and interrupted the dead silence in the room. A plump man in a gray suit rushed inside with his head covered in sweat. He exclaimed in anxiety once he saw Zhou Bin. Director Zhou, we're in trouble. The elegant and relaxed Zhou Bin furrowed his brows from being interrupted, and he turned to the intruder unhappily. It's so early in the morning. What are you shouting about? The fatty replied anxiously, Director Zhou, the top boss didn't even call to let us know and suddenly sent a new manager over. He'll be coming over today, and we all have to cooperate with him. What do you think Chairman Chu meant by this? Although Dazzling was at the bottom of the list of subsidiaries owned by Worldwide, it was, after all, still under the banner of Worldwide. As the saying goes, he who leans on a good tree will have a good shade. Compared to the other smaller firms, they were still much better. It wasn't an easy task to enter Dazzling as either an artist or manager. You had to have relevant work experience and educational background, not to mention you had to overcome all challenges presented during the interview. Only after passing these tests could you be a part of Dazzling. It was quite demanding. The main point was that Zhou Bin was the boss. Whoever wanted to enter the company had to first get his nod of approval, in addition to approval from the managers. A new manager coming over so suddenly with such extensive privileges Nobody could accept this, especially not somebody entering Zhou Wenbin's faction, so this attracted quite a bit of attention. Zhou Wenbin narrowed his eyes and a gloominess came over his face as he sneered, "That Yi Bai guy?" The fatty nodded continuously. Right? That's his name. Director Zhou. You knew about it? Zhou Wenbin seemed to be deep in thought as his face contorted even further. He's just a greenhorn. You think he can succeed when he's in my territory? Just go about doing what you need to do. Stop making a big fuss out of every little thing. Haha, this brat. I didn't expect him to actually use Gao Feng from Mars Weekly to shift the public's opinion. In the end, he really cleared Han Xianyu's name and ruined my plans. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. Initially, the plan was once Han Xianyu went down, the company would have chosen to groom Gong Su to replace Han Xianyu, but now, not only was Han Xianyu acquitted, his popularity even soared higher. Once again, Zhou Wenbin was pinned down by Fei Yang. With that thought, Zhou Wenbin sneered, "Yi Bai, very well. He ruined my plans, and he still dares to act recklessly in my own territory. This is a good time to settle all scores with him." Hearing the boss say that, the fatty calmed down and immediately sucked up to Zhou Wenbin. With Binji around, nobody else would be able to succeed around here. The fatty praised him repeatedly while discreetly looking across at the pale teenager on the sofa. Anything else? Zhou Wenbin glanced at him unhappily. No, nothing else. If there's nothing else, then why don't you get lost? Zhou Wenbin's mind was obviously focused on Luo Chan right now, so he was very upset at being interrupted. Yes, I'll get lost now. Right now. The fatty left stealthily and even closed the door shut on purpose. After the fatty left, there were suddenly only 2 people left in the enormous office. Zhou Wenbin lightly rapped on the table with his fingers, and a hint of impatience appeared on his face. Luo Chun, there's a limit to my patience. Luo Chun seemed to suffer some sort of grievance as his eyes constricted and turned icy. Zhou Wenbin saw that and backtracked, saying gently, Luo Chun, look at you. Why are you so stubborn? What's so bad about being with me? Zhou Wenbin walked towards Luo Chun slowly. He dragged his words out and continued. As long as you're obedient, not only will I settle your mother's medical bills, I will even make you famous. As Zhou Wenbin got closer, Luo Chen's body was as stiff as a board. His hands by his side clenched tightly like he was about to explode in the next second. Zhou Wenbin was sure he wouldn't dare to go against him, so he chuckled and got even closer, placing his hand on Luo Chen's shoulder. Luo Chen, you've resisted me for 3 years already. Are you sure you want to continue being so stubborn? There are only a few golden years for an artist. Do you still have another 3 years to waste? Did you know? If you cooperated with me earlier, with your caliber, you should have almost the same standing as Gong Su in the entertainment industry by now. Who knows, you might have even surpassed Han Xianyu. Zhou Wenbin wheedled, but Luo Chen's thin lips were pursed tightly. He refused to speak. Seeing that his lips were pursed so tightly, not letting even a drop of oil or grain of salt get between them, Zhou Wenbin snorted, his tone full of mockery. Luo Chen, don't tell me you think you can endure until the end of your contract and leave me right after? Zhou Wenbin sighed and shook his head sympathetically. You're really a naive and silly kid. I can help you while you're with Worldwide, but you think that after leaving Worldwide I'd allow you to have a chance to succeed? There was finally some change in Luo Chen's face as he spoke with an unusually hoarse voice. What should I do for you to let me off? Zhou Wenbin's fingers slowly slid down Luo Chen's slim neck, and his breathing got heavier. Luo Chen, you're a smart guy. You know very well what I want, don't you? And I, Zhou Wenbin, will get what I want. I am not gay. Luo Chan raised his voice, enunciating each word carefully. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. Zhou Wenbin sneered. So what? Luo Chen, you've been in this industry for so long. Don't tell me you're still so innocent. Do you know how Zhao Mingkai got famous? He's not better than you in any way, but in just half a year, he's already become a second-tier star. All because I helped him pull some strings with Chairman Liang. As long as someone's willing to pay to groom you, who cares if your financial backer is male or female? Unless you're like Gong Su, a super-rich second-generation kid born with a silver spoon and a millionaire father as your backer, giving you tons of money to play with. Otherwise, you have to play by the rules of this industry. Zhou Wenbin changed his tone and spoke patiently. Luo Qin, don't be so rigid. When I'm done having fun, I'll introduce a financial backer to you, then. Luo Qin couldn't endure it anymore. He punched the teapot in front of him like a caged beast and yelled, "Shut up! I want a change of manager." Zhou Wenbin was stunned at first, then he burst out laughing as if he just heard a great joke. "Ha ha ha, you want a change of manager? Sure, sure. Apply for it with the office. I want to see who would want you in worldwide." Zhou Wenbin's face darkened when he said the last word. Fresh blood trickled from the hand Luo Chun used to smash the teapot as he stared at Zhou Wenbin with overwhelmingly murderous intentions. The drops of fresh red blood and his porcelain-fair skin contrasted very obviously, making him even more dangerously enticing, while his eyes in such extreme fury were also extremely beautiful at the same time, like a blossoming flower. Zhou Wenbin's muddy eyes were clouded with lust as he pounced on Luo Chun. "Luo Qin, don't worry at all. As long as you're obedient, I'll never let you suffer. Get lost." "Luo Qin, it's fine if you're just thinking for yourself, but what about your mother? Do you want her to suffer with you?" The punch Luo Qin initially wanted to throw at Zhou Wenbin's face paused in midair. When Zhou Wenbin saw this, he quickly grabbed the opportunity and lunged straight for Luo Qin's mouth. Just at this exact moment, bang, the door of the office was kicked open. The door slammed against the wall, letting out an earth-shattering bang. A slender figure stood at the door, blocking the light. He had a carefree vibe and a smirk on his dark red lips. His gleaming and watery peach blossom eyes were slightly raised. As if he was walking in his own backyard, the man straightened the corners of his shirt and strolled inside. He stared sideways at Zhou Wenbin, who was in disbelief with his face as red as a pig's liver. He said leisurely, "Tisk, it's so early in the morning and great manager Zhou you're in. Such a good mood, huh?" When he saw clearly who barged in, Zhou Wenbin almost crushed his own teeth as he yelled, "Bye. This brat again." On the sofa, Luo Chun pushed Zhou Wenbin away harshly and looked in panic towards the door at the stranger who just emerged. "I'm so sorry. Nobody answered when I knocked, so I thought something happened to you." Yi Wanwan lied, without showing the slightest fear. After she met Luo Chin's panic-stricken eyes, she lifted her legs and kicked the door shut without any expression on her face, blocking off this sight from the outside world. "What are you doing here?" Zhou Wenbin nearly spewed out blood from Yi by ruining his plans once again. Yi Wanwan stretched out her arms and pulled out a chair, sat down lazily and waved a file at him. "I came here to report for work. Director Zhou, I'll need to trouble you to go through the handover with me. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon." Zhou Wenbin straightened his collar and walked over, holding in his anger. He scanned the document. It was indeed for the handover. Zhou Wenbin's face darkened as he flipped through the contracts and documents in a rush. He then took out a pen and signed his name. Zhou Wenbin took a deep breath. "Is that all?" "Yup, I appreciate it." Yi Wanwan accepted the document, satisfied. "Get lost then." Zhou Wenbin was fuming. It took him 3 whole years and finally, he was able to settle things with that Luo Chun. But in the end, this brat ruined his plans. He had more than enough time to deal with this brat, Yibai, who thought so highly of himself, but he'd never let Luo Chun off today no matter what. Luo Chun knew full well that Zhou Wenbin wouldn't let him off so easily today, seeing as Zhou Wenbin sent the guest off so impatiently. Since the business deal between the two of them was almost done, he turned pale, knowing that once that stranger left, he'd be all alone with Zhou Wenbin once again. As expected, after Zhou Wenbin signed the documents, the man didn't outstay his welcome and stood up. It was as if Luo Chun fell into an ice cave. His heart sank the ground. However, the moment the man stood up, that pair of dazzling eyes looked towards him. He heard the man speaking in his direction. "You're Luo Chun? Follow me then." Luo Chen looked at the man in shock and was totally dumbfounded. Was he talking to me? Not only was Luo Chen stunned, even Zhou Wenbin's face changed. Yi Bai, what do you mean by this? The man frowned. His slender and fair fingers pointed at a few words in the document. Didn't you read the contract just now, Director Zhou? Read what? Zhou Wenbin said in annoyance. The man smiled wryly and shot him a look, then spoke languidly. Luo Chen belongs to me now. What did you just say? Zhou Wenbin's face stiffened. The teenager in the corner was in a daze as well, looking like he couldn't understand Yi Bai's words. I said Luo Chen now belongs to me. The man repeated himself. Zhou Wenbin sneered. Ha. He belongs to you? What nonsense. Luo Chen has been signed under my name for 3 years. Who are you to take him away? The man spoke in a matter-of-fact tone. It was written very clearly in the documents you just signed. Zhou Wenbin didn't read through those documents carefully at all. When he heard what the man said, he took a big stride forward and read the document once again. As he read, his face got uglier as he exploded in a roar. This is impossible. Yi Wanwan shrugged. This was what Chairman Chu agreed to personally. He has already signed on the documents as well, so if you don't believe me, you can call and ask him yourself. Zhou Wenbin stared at the documents for a very long time and finally slammed on the desk. He glared at him with a darkened face and gritted his teeth. I'll definitely call him. Yi Wanwan wasn't worried at all as she walked over to the sofa leisurely and sat down. She poured a cup of tea for herself and used the lid of the cup to lightly push the tea leaves. She pursed her lips and said lazily, Director Zhou, please go ahead, but do hurry. I have to quickly deal with the injuries on my artiste. At the same time, Luo Chen stood a few steps away and stared blankly at the man who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. Hearing Yi Bai call Luo Chen my artiste right in his face with such arrogance, Zhou Wenbin simmered with rage. Nobody dared to defy him at dazzling all these years, so how could a little brat like this step over him and disrespect him like this? Thus, he called Chairman Chu on the spot and even turned on the video. Zhou Wenbin was the top manager at Dazzling Media. 90% of Dazzling's revenue came from the artistes under him. Just Gong Su alone was enough to secure his position, so his words definitely held weight at headquarters. He was a veteran at the company while this clown was just a young manager who just entered. It wasn't hard to guess whose side Chu Hongguang would stand on. The glimmer of hope just ignited in Luo Chen was once again extinguished by a pail of cold water. Hello, Chairman Chu. Have you met Yi Bai? Have you finished the handover? In the video call, Chairman Chu was seated in the big mahogany chair in his office. Zhou Wenbin looked coldly towards Yi Bai and said, He's here right now and I was about to bring this issue up. What is it? Is there a problem? Chairman Chu naturally noticed Yi Bai in the video call as well. Chairman Chu, I reviewed the handover documents and the artiste he's chosen is someone under me. He's been with me for 3 years and our contract hasn't ended yet. I'm afraid it's against the rules to change hands halfway. Chu Hongguang thought for a brief moment. That Luo Chen guy? He's just an unpopular little artiste. Just hand him over. How is this against the rules? Zhou Wenbin replied without a change in his expression. It's such a huge waste of the company's resources to spend it on a worthless artiste like him. I simply can't agree with Yi Bai's judgment. Hearing Zhou Wenbin's words, Luo Chen's pale and thin lips pressed together. Yet that man, Yi Bai, still had that same relaxed look on his face. He looked at Zhou Wenbin coldly with a slight mockery in his eyes. He chose Luo Chen and I agreed to it as well. Chu Hongguang didn't look like he had any intention of changing his mind, and it was obvious that he didn't care about wasting a few resources. A hint of darkness flashed in Zhou Wenbin's eyes like his heart had been shot by an arrow. He kept trying to persuade his boss, Chairman Chu, Yi Bai's breaking the company's regulations outright and causing other artistes with more potential to be bitterly disappointed. As the director, I really can't allow this to happen. Zhou Wenbin put on a facade that he was very understanding and was trying his best to resolve this matter. Chairman Chu, why don't we do it this way? I'll give him Lin Hao. Lin Hao is outstanding in his supporting role in the last movie he did and has gained a lot of popularity. Riding on this, it's not a problem for him to get to a B-list status. Zhou Wenbin sounded like he had the company's best interests at heart and seemed very generous. Nobody would suspect him of having the filthy intentions he really had. This Yibai has to try harder if he wants to take me on. Yibai, Wenbin wants to give Lin Hao to you. What do you think? Chu Hongguang looked at Yibai. A switch? Sure. Surprisingly, Yi Wanwan's attitude was very easygoing. Zhou Wenbin narrowed his eyes. He actually agreed to it so easily? He thought this Yibai would definitely complain about him to Chairman Chu, telling the boss how he forced himself onto Luo Chan just now. After listening to Yibai's words, Luo Chen's face turned blank. It was like his heart had come crashing down from a tall building. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. Lin Hao is a rising star with a bright future compared to Luo Chen, who hadn't had a single assignment in 3 years and had long been forgotten by everyone. Anyone would know who the right choice would be. I should have known. Should have known? Zhou Wenbin was right. There's nobody, in the entire worldwide, who wants me. Nobody. My whole life was over long ago. Seeing that Yibai was agreeable, Zhou Wenbin discreetly revealed a despicable expression. He immediately settled for just a small-time artiste? This Yibai is so inexperienced. Zhou Wenbin spoke loftily, acting like he was very charitable. Since manager Yi has agreed to it, then it's set. I'll get someone to bring Lin Hao's engagement contract over for you to sign. Hold it. Yi Wanwan interrupted Zhou Wenbin. Zhou Wenbin raised his brows and seemed a bit displeased. What? Do you have any other requests? Yi Wanwan smirked and glanced at Zhou Wenbin. A hint of disdain and contempt flashed across his eyes as he spoke. We can have a switch, but Director Zhou, isn't Lin Hao a little subpar? If you want to switch, then I'll exchange him for Gong Su. Zhou Wenbin was stunned for a moment before he absorbed what Yibai just demanded. His face changed and he burst into a rage. Yibai, you're too arrogant. You really think I can't do anything to you? Chairman Chu, did you hear what he just said? This chump is obviously trying to stir up trouble. He actually compared this person that nobody has ever heard of to the most popular artiste under me. It's simply ridiculous. Not to mention Zhou Wenbin, but even Luo Chun himself was stunned when he heard what Yibai said. His clear and vacant eyes were filled with disbelief. Yi Wanwan's expression remained unchanged as she sneered. I'm stirring up trouble? Just who's the one stirring up trouble? Chairman Chu, you're the one who ordered that everyone in Dazzling had to cooperate with me. With that said, the indifference in Yi Wanwan's eyes disappeared instantly. Her cold gaze shot towards Zhou Wenbin as she snapped. But Director Zhou, what about you? Are you not part of Dazzling Media, someone under Chairman Chu? Or do you think that all of Dazzling belongs to you, and you're allowed to ignore Chairman Chu's decisions? You don't even care about what Chairman Chu says and keep getting in the way. Yi Wanwan obviously didn't mention how Zhou Wenbin was violating Luo Chen because she knew it'd be no use even if she did. One was the golden manager while the other was an artiste past his prime. It was obvious which side Chu Hongguang would stand with. It was very common for such things to happen in the entertainment industry. If things went wrong, Zhou Wenbin might even accuse Luo Chen of seducing him instead. So, what is Chu Hongguang most concerned about? His power and status. With Zhou Wenbin's position, it was like he was a ruler of a vassal state far away from the imperial capital, guarding his throne and arrogantly growing his army. But in the entertainment industry, it was frowned upon for a manager to have too much power. Many established entertainment companies collapsed overnight because a manager poached too many artistes when they left the company. Hearing Yibai's interrogation, Zhou Wenbin gradually panicked as he rebuked coldly, Yibai, don't try to drive a wedge between us now. When did I say anything like that? One must understand that Chu Hongguang hated having someone challenging his authority and escaping his control. As expected, Chu Hongguang's face started to change. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. Even though Chu Hongguang knew Yi Bai was just trying to drive a wedge between him and Zhou Wenbin, he still took his words seriously. Zhou Wenbin had certainly been too disagreeable recently. He undermined him as the chairman umpteen times, and he even heard that Zhou Wenbin had been in private contact with people from the Yi group. With that thought, Chu Hongguang finally said, "Wenbin, hand over the contract. I've already made up my mind on this matter." "But, Chairman Chu," Chu Hongguang's face darkened. "What? Can't I even transfer an artiste now? If you're not agreeable to this, then hand Gong Su over." For Chairman Chu to say something like that, he must be really agitated. "Of course you can, Chairman Chu, that's not what I meant. I'll do it right away." To prevent agitating Chu Hongguang any further, Zhou Wenbin could only take a step back. Chu Hongguang humphed and hung up the video call. It seems like Yi Bai's right. If dazzling was run by Zhou Wenbin alone, nothing good will come of it. If Zhou Wenbin developed any malicious intentions, all of dazzling would be cleared out. But this Yi Bai is too young and reckless. He lets his emotions affect his decisions, stubbornly asking for that Luo Qing guy in a fit. Can Yi Bai really take Zhou Wenbin on? After he ended the video call, Zhou Wenbin made a very angry call to get his assistant and lawyer to come and deal with the handover. While he was signing the papers, he stared at Yi Bai like he wanted to swallow him alive. "Damn it, I was so close to succeeding yet I failed once again." After the transfer of Luo Chen to her was done, Yi Wanwan waved the contract, curled her lips, and stood up. "Appreciate it, Director Zhou." Everything happened so abruptly that Luo Chen still hadn't regained his senses when he saw his own name under the new management contract. It was only after realizing that Yi Wanwan had already stood up and was ready to leave that he woke up and quickly followed behind. Just as he stepped out, Zhou Wenbin's gloomy voice came from behind. "Luo Chen, you better think this through carefully. Do you really want to follow this immature and inexperienced manager with a complete lack of network and resources?" Luo Chen paused only for a second before continuing to walk in Yi Bai's direction. A crash resounded from the office. It was the aftermath of Zhou Wenbin kicking the coffee table. "Teske, there are so many fresh and obedient artistes in the company. He could have had any one of them." This Luo Chen was almost 21 years old. He was no longer the same as before. Zhou Wenbin only wanted him because he couldn't have him, but turned out this new guy doesn't know what's good for him. Good. Very good. I want to see what happens when Luo Chen follows Yi Bai. In the office at the second story, after all, she was someone Chu Hongguang sent over personally, so she had to appear to have some status. Although Yi Wanwan's office wasn't as spacious or grand as Zhou Wenbin's, it wasn't bad. It was minimalist and had great lighting. "Make yourself comfortable." Yi Wanwan took out the first aid kit from one of the drawers. Luo Chen lowered his head and disinfected his wounds silently. Then he placed a bandage over it. Yi Wanwan pulled out a chair and sat in front of the desk, then sized up the man before her without any expression on her face. She called him a man, but she thought he was more like a teenager. The present Luo Chen and that teenager she saw 3 years ago were totally identical. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. But even if his appearance remained the same, his temperament might have changed. The Luo Chen 3 years ago was like a white sheet of paper, clean and flawless, full of vigor and talent. His unique traits were simply like a breath of fresh air in the materialistic entertainment industry. But at the same time, being so pure gave people the desire to trample on him. Luo Chen still had that delicate and perfect face today, but it was white as snow. He was still a teenager, yet there was a trace of desolation in his eyes, like an old man without a flicker of light in him. Initially, Yi Wanwan couldn't figure out why there was no news of Luo Chen at all when all the other main leads from Terrifying Dragon became so popular. Even the supporting actors were doing well. Now she knew why. Luo Chen was 18 at that time, and he recently entered university, carrying a dream within him, and just successfully acted in the first movie of his life. It was just the beginning of his life. He'd worked so hard for the past 18 years, and finally started a career he was passionate about. He was finally able to earn money and let his mother live a good life. But all these dreams were crushed by Zhou Wenbin. He didn't have any power nor status. His words didn't hold any weight, so one bad word from Zhou Wenbin could drive him to his death. He witnessed how those artistes who debuted at the same time as him, including those who were much more inferior to him, slowly gained popularity and left him in the dust. He watched his mother become older and weaker, yet he was a total failure and couldn't see any hope in his future. Since Luo Chen was too unpopular in her past life, the only memory of him Yuanwan had was his role in Terrifying Dragon, so she didn't even know what happened to him in the end. It probably wasn't a good ending since he never became popular, meaning that he didn't give in to Zhou Wenbin. On the sofa, Luo Chen's body looked very frail. His black hair, however, looked quite soft, a big contrast from his pale and sickly skin. Yuanwan saw how he hung his head and dressed his wound in silence. She saw how he looked so obedient and her heart softened. She couldn't help it. After all, she was actually a 27-year-old in her heart, and seeing this kind of innocent and gentle little sheep made it hard to control the overflowing maternal love in her. Luo Chen noticed her gaze upon him as he lifted his head and looked at the person behind the desk. That pair of clear eyes was filled with alertness and vigilance. After being manipulated for 3 whole years, it whittled away all his innocence and pureness. He could no longer trust anyone, even if this person saved him from Zhou Wenbin's hands. Who knows? Maybe he's another Zhou Wenbin? With that thought, Luo Chen's nerves tensed up instantly. At this moment, Yuanwan also returned to her senses and was ready to talk business. She flipped open a black leather notebook and asked directly, "What shows or assignments have you taken up in the past 3 years?" Luo Chen's face was dark as he replied with a hoarse voice, "Nothing. No shows and no assignments." This reply was exactly as she expected. Yuanwan, what about private assignments? Luo Chen shook his head. No, the company doesn't allow those. Yuanwan kept asking, "Are you seeing anyone? Do you have a partner? Including your exes?" Luo Chen was stunned for a brief moment, and his body tensed up because of this personal question. He pursed his lips and replied, "No, I didn't have any in the past either." Yuanwan was somewhat surprised as she tapped the pen in her hand. Although Luo Chen was still quite young, he was 21 and was no longer a kid. Also, with looks like his, had he actually not dated before? Must he be so pure? Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. Any sexual partners? Fuck buddies? One-night stands? Yuanwan continued probing with a serious expression. It was best if he didn't have any, but if he did, she had to make sure to deal with his dirty past first. Since Yuanwan was so straightforward, Luo Chen's back stiffened even more as he sat up as straight as a ruler. No. The seriousness on Yuanwan's face then dissipated slightly. Very good. After that, she continued asking indifferently, "Who's handling your Weibo account now? Is it under your own control?" "Benji was in charge of it," Luo Chen replied. "No wonder his Weibo's been so pathetic the past 3 years. There's no activity at all." Yuanwan frowned then said, "All right, I'll take over from here. Check all your social media accounts once when you get home and delete all the inappropriate content." "I'll be checking." Luo Chen complied with her orders subconsciously. "All right. Oh yes, did the company give you basic pay?" Yuanwan asked. Luo Chen replied bitterly, "They haven't paid me for almost half a year." "Then what have you been doing all this time?" Yuanwan asked. Luo Chen looked a little ashamed. "I've been doing odd jobs." He couldn't do anything related to the entertainment industry and couldn't take on any private assignments. Otherwise, he'd be sued by the company, so he had no choice but to take on odd jobs. Yuanwan's expression turned cold. Contract artistes did usually get a basic salary, but Zhou Wenbin didn't arrange any assignments or jobs for him, kept clinging on to his contract, refused to let him go, and even cut his basic pay. He was obviously trying to drive him to his death. Even with that pathetic basic pay, other artistes might be able to survive just by taking on one assignment or taking a few photographs for a magazine. But to Luo Chen, that was the only income he got from the company. It wasn't hard to imagine what kind of hardships he had to endure these past 3 years. He was talented and clever and was meant to display his talents in showbiz, yet he was forced to do odd jobs at the lowest level to earn his keep. Luo Chen probably intended to endure another 2 years, then sign with another company. His 5 precious years would be down the drain just like that, and even if his contract ended, judging by Zhou and Bin's treacherous ways, he'd never give him a chance to make it big. Nobody would want a troublesome artiste past their prime. Previously, in Zhou and Bin's office, she overheard that Luo Chun was unable to even pay for his mother's medical bills. Yuanwan thought about it for a while, then said, "I'll get someone to transfer the salary the company owed you all at once. You may use it for emergencies first." Yuanwan gave a call to the finance department immediately. Chu Hongguang had just thrown a fit, and Zhou and Bin wouldn't dare to make things difficult for her over such matters, so she was able to make these small decisions herself. As expected, the finance department whined a little and made excuses like the company wanted to increase their income and economize on expenditures, but in the end, they agreed to give him his salary. "It's done. Just go get it directly from the finance department later." Seeing that Yi Bai made this call on the spot and got 6 months' worth of salary back for him, Luo Chen's eyes shifted slightly and he replied with a dry and hoarse voice, "Thank you." Although half a year of basic pay only added up to about 10,000 yuan, it was enough to get him out of his desperate situation. However, in the future, he had no idea what would happen. This man really wants to work with me? But why must it be me? Why didn't he agree when Zhou and Bin wanted to switch me with Lin Hao? He had no idea what redeeming qualities he had that someone would be willing to spend a great amount of energy on him and even start a feud with Zhou and Bin. When he first debuted 3 years ago, he was indeed quite popular and even had a chance to make it big, but during the next 3 years, since teen idols were all the rage, all the companies frantically churned out teen idols and groomed fresh meat constantly. There was only a handful who could become famous, and the competition was extremely intense. There were numerous newcomers and interns who had the same standing as him in their respective companies. Furthermore, each of them had good looks and were between the ages of 16 to 20 while he already missed his prime period in age, so he was in a very awkward situation. He knew all this very well. Yuanwan looked at Luo Chun, who was deep in thought. Her face became more stern as she said, "And one last question. Your sexual orientation?" Suddenly hearing this question, the color that had just reappeared on Luo Chen's face faded instantly and his body was as stiff as a board. Yuanwan noticed Luo Chen's reaction and really couldn't bear to keep asking, but she didn't have a choice. These were important questions, and she had to be clear about the answers before working with him. Especially the question about his sexual orientation. Although society was currently quite open-minded and more accepting of homosexuals that even the fujoshi market was expanding, the mainstream media wasn't so accepting on this, and it was definitely a taboo in the entertainment industry. Plus, if senior management found out an artist was homosexual, it would be the end of that artist's career. Yuanwan strengthened her resolve and asked, "Is this question very hard to answer? Do you like men, women, or are you fine with both?" It was obvious that Luo Chun was repulsed by this question. He pursed his lips and finally mumbled out a word after a very long time, "Women." Yuanwan observed him closely. Luo Chen's answer wasn't fake, and his disgust towards men was very clear, but he didn't seem to have a liking for women when he answered. As long as he doesn't have those tendencies, it's all good. Yuanwan looked at the little lamb sitting in front of her dying from fear, and her tone became gentler. "So sorry for asking all these questions. There might have been some questions that made you uncomfortable, but now I'm your manager, and I have to have a clear understanding of everything about you. From today onwards, every matter of yours, no matter how big or small, will be my responsibility. It's not just limited to your job. It includes shows you receive, your assignments, your style of dress, your diet, lodging and transportation, your usual social activities, the friends you hang out with, your dating partner. Whatever you say and however you act, you must comply with all my instructions. You must inform me immediately if anything happens, including anything regarding the questions you just answered, and you're not allowed to hide anything from me. Do you have any problem with what I just said?" You may bring them up now. Compared to Zhou and Bin's attempt to titillate him with his flirting and coercion, this new manager was very strict, but this kind of attitude strangely helped him feel more at ease. He nodded his head lightly and replied obediently, I will cooperate. Yi Wanwan was satisfied and didn't waste any more time. She continued discussing some other details with him. When she was sure there was nothing she overlooked, Yi Wanwan finally stopped. Okay, we'll stop here for today. Add me to your contacts, sleep earlier tonight, and come down to the company's film studio tomorrow at 9 a.m. If you have no problems, you may go back now. Luo Chun saved her number and added her on WeChat, then left the office feeling a bit perplexed. This man really wants me? Why was he so confident to put all his bargaining chips on me? I haven't acted for 3 entire years. Can I really do it? More than being afraid of this man, what he feared most was that he couldn't do it. Yi Wanwan was familiarizing herself with her new job and was busy completing all the handover procedures. When she was done, the sky was already dark. Seeing it was getting so late, Yi Wanwan stopped to stretch, put the files away, and prepared to go home. Although there were too many things to do and learn, she thoroughly enjoyed the sense of fulfillment she got from her job. She felt alive. After Yi Wanwan left the office, she started walking on the sidewalk when all of a sudden, someone honked at her from behind. A silvery gray Porsche slowly drove up to her as she walked. The car window was rolled down and a dashing face appeared on the driver's side. Yi Bai. The man in the car called out to her. Yi Wanwan was surprised and stopped in her tracks. Han Xianyu, get in. Yi Wanwan knew it was inconvenient for him to stop on the road for long, so she quickly got into the passenger seat. Were you passing by? The corners of Han Xianyu's eyes revealed a warm smile. I especially waited for you. Did Zhou Wenbin give you a hard time? It's only your first day. Why did you have to work overtime? Yi Wanwan curled her lips and said arrogantly, he wishes he gave me a hard time. In other words, Zhou Wenbin didn't get what he wished for. I knew you wouldn't be bullied. Han Xianyu grinned in relief. Don't you have to work? Yi Wanwan glanced at Han Xianyu, concerned. The girl's case had already been settled, so he should be quite busy now. Just the number of reporters who wanted to interview him numbered in the hundreds and would be able to form a line around Imperial City. But other than posting a message of appreciation on Weibo to his supporters, he hadn't accepted a single interview or appeared in public, causing all his fans to be worried sick, afraid that he became discouraged by this damning incident. They were also worried he'd leave the entertainment industry altogether. Since Han Xianyu's fate had changed, Yi Wanwan was unable to foresee what would happen to him in the future. The worried gaze from Yi Wanwan warmed Han Xianyu's heart. I took a few days off to rest, that's all. Oh right, my friend's throwing a party tonight. Would you like to go with me? There'll be many people from the industry there. I can introduce some of them to you. The incident with the girl had mentally and physically exhausted him. Even if the case was settled, it still affected him to the point that he didn't even have the energy to do much these days. His manager was worried that something would happen to him, so he forced him to leave the house and to deny the rumors about him leaving the industry at the same time. They drove slowly. Soon, they arrived at Dazzling Media. Yi Wanwan thought about his invitation. She really needed to network and knew Han Xianyu was also trying to help her, so she replied gratefully, Sure, I don't have anything planned tonight. Thanks. Han Xianyu initially felt dispirited, but after Yi Wanwan agreed, his mood lifted somewhat. After they arrived at the party, Yi Wanwan was dumbfounded. The party was held at an outdoor swimming pool. There were hot girls in bikinis and fresh meat in swimming trunks everywhere, laughing and having fun in the pool. Why didn't you tell me it was a pool party? What's wrong? Han Xianyu was confused. Yi Wanwan furrowed her brows. Nothing. Thankfully, not everyone was in their bathing suits. There were a few youngsters by the side who were chatting in their formal attire. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. Oh God. Quick look. Is that Han Xianyu at the entrance? He hasn't shown his face since that incident. I can't believe he actually came today. I even heard he wanted to leave the industry and live a secluded life overseas. Gave me such a scare. How could that be? He profited from that disaster and is currently the most popular superstar, fanning the flames of his success. After what happened, his popularity surpassed Ling Xiaozhou and Gong Su. This incident about Han Xianyu shocked everyone in the industry. Everybody had followed the news, so Han Xianyu's sudden appearance today attracted a lot of attention. Before, everyone in the industry thought Han Xianyu was doomed for sure. After all, they also heard Worldwide was ready to give up. Who would have guessed the situation would suddenly take such a drastic turn? Not only did Han Xianyu not fall from his pedestal, but his status became even more stable. His popularity and prestige reached its peak, demonstrating a positive pattern in the industry. The degree of hatred against you previously would predict how popular you'd become later. In the entertainment industry, everyone would trample on you when you're at your lowest and lift you high up when you're at your highest. When Han Xianyu was in trouble, everyone steered far away from him. But now that he made a comeback, everyone was trying to worm their way to becoming friends with him. At the same time, the new face next to Han Xianyu attracted a lot of attention as well. Wait, who's that person next to Han Xianyu? He's handsome. Not sure, I've never seen him before. Maybe he's a newcomer from Worldwide? Out of curiosity, someone actually went up to ask, Xianyu, this is my friend, Yi Bai. When did Worldwide take on such a good-looking newcomer? Why wasn't I aware of it? He's a manager, Han Xianyu replied. Yi Wanwan brought out the business cards she just received that day. Hello, this is my card. Manager? The guy was surprised and looked at this young man before him, whose every movement was so attractive. Although there were some managers who had looks comparable to the celebrities, this young man's dashing appearance was really uncommon. Why is Han Xianyu suddenly so close to this new manager? Is he planning to change managers? Yi Wanwan didn't have any hopes for making any major moves that night. She simply wanted to follow Han Xianyu around so people would become familiar with her, and at the same time, she tried to remember everyone she met. In a field such as the entertainment industry, you never know when you could use someone's help. After Han Xianyu brought Yi Wanwan to meet a few of his friends, they found a corner and started chatting. A waiter carried a tray of drinks over and Han Xianyu took a glass. When the waiter approached Yi Wanwan, he told the waiter, he doesn't drink. Please get him a White Russian. Yi Wanwan raised her brows in surprise. She didn't expect that Han Xianyu would be so sweet to remember her habits after just one time. But, White Russian? This cocktail only has a little vodka. It's mostly just milk. Even though it's very easy to drink, isn't it more suitable for girls? In her previous life, she wasn't so obedient and often went against Si Han's wishes. Drinking, till she was dead drunk, was nothing out of the ordinary, so she knew quite a bit about alcohol. It's okay. I'll drink this, Yi Wanwan said, then took a glass of whiskey from the tray. Han Xianyu was confused. I thought your girlfriend doesn't allow you to drink? Yi Wanwan curled her lips, but that was because my girlfriend was sitting right next to me at the time, so I didn't dare, all right? Things are different now. Before coming to this party, she found out from Sui that Si Han received a call last night and left on an overseas business trip. He definitely wouldn't be back by today, so obviously, she was feeling gutsy. Of course, most importantly, she had to preserve a man's dignity. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. How could a big man like me drink such a sissy cocktail? It's totally inconsistent with my look. She won't be around these 2 days. Yi Wanwan acted like she just managed to catch a break, evoking the image of a downtrodden boyfriend who was finally let loose. She played this role very well. As a man himself, Han Xianyu found Yi Wanwan's behavior very normal, so he laughed and said, "Oh right, I heard you chose to take on Luo Chen?" Yi Wanwan nodded. Yup. Why him? Yi Wanwan couldn't really tell him that she knew the future, so she simply replied, "He's pleasing to the eyes, I guess?" Han Xianyu chuckled. You might as well say he's handsome. Yi Wanwan laughed as well and shrugged. Isn't that the truth? He's even better looking in person. Truly the nation's first love. Also, Luo Chen just had a run of bad luck lately. His looks and skills were pretty good, but it's not hard to find someone who looks good, right? Luo Chen's quite talented, but too bad. His luck's not too great, and he's in quite an awkward situation right now. A hint of disgust flashed in Han Xianyu's eyes. The things Zhou Wenbin did in private might not have been known to the outside world, but it didn't mean nobody knew about it. He could roughly guess why Luo Chen was buried in the snow, so to speak. Although he wasn't sure what Yi Bai's plan was, he believed Yi Bai had his reasons for choosing Luo Chen. Anyway, just let me know if you need help, Han Xianyu offered. Yi Wanwan took a sip of her drink. Don't worry, I won't stand on ceremony with you. Yi Wanwan's attitude made Han Xianyu feel at ease. He turned towards the pool and asked, "Not going for a swim?" Yi Wanwan held her glass and supported her head in her hand. Too lazy to change. You go ahead. Not swimming at a pool party? I'll watch you swim. Han Xianyu looked at how lazy she was and could only shake his head helplessly. He went ahead without her. Shortly after, Han Xianyu changed out of his clothes and came out with only blue and black skin-tight swimming trunks. Yi Wanwan sized up the naked body before her with pure appreciation. Han Xianyu's skin was a healthy, light honey shade, and he maintained his body well. One look and she knew he had been working out for a long time to obtain that figure. Perfect six-pack. An Apollo's belt that could cause any girl to be lost in wild and fanciful thoughts. A wide waist and a narrow butt, and two long and straight legs. Among all the fresh meat at the party, there were many white-boiled chickens, so Han Xianyu's figure wasn't half bad. Some young female stars started screaming when he came out. Ah, Han Xianyu has such an amazing figure. Which moron said Han Xianyu used a body double in nude scenes? Does he even need a double with a body like that? Those abs. I really want to touch them. And those big long legs. Han Xianyu was pretty confident about his own figure. He stood there openly for Yi Wanwan to admire him, then tossed his phone to her. I'm going down for a swim. Hold on to my phone. He's letting me hold on to something so private? It seems he doesn't have his guard up around me at all. After Han Xianyu went to the pool, there were shrieks of excitement everywhere. Maybe it was the alcohol, but when Yi Wanwan heard the shrieks around her, another body inexplicably surfaced in her mind, and it was naked. Under the glow from the morning sun, she saw the man's naked back. Unlike Han Xianyu's figure that had undergone a strict fitness regimen, every contour of that man's body had an explosive force and unruliness. It was as perfect as a work of art, especially since she noticed some remnants of lust for him still lingering in herself. But the man's eyes were as cold as ice that would never melt. Damn, am I really drunk? There were so many good-looking people here. Yet she was fantasizing about C.E. Han's naked body, and that time he forced himself onto her like he wanted to devour her entire being. Stop, stop, stop. Stop. Yi Wanwan shook her head hard to get rid of those provocative images in her head. On the other side, Han Xianyu returned after swimming a few laps and walked towards her with droplets of water dripping from his body. Yi Wanwan passed him the towel that was on the seat next to her. Thanks. Han Xianyu took the white towel and quickly wiped his body. Then he got the waiter to get him a glass of red wine. Han Xianyu had just sat down when a woman in a red dress with big curls strode towards the both of them like an enchanting witch in her high heels. The woman stroked Han Xianyu's abs without a word, easily accomplishing something all the girls at the party wanted to do but couldn't. Aya, little angel Xianyu, your bod's getting better. Han Xianyu, who had just been taken advantage of, looked speechless when he saw this woman. Exine Jia. Yi Wanwan was already a little tipsy at this point, so when she saw a delightful beauty walking towards her, her eyes lit up. It was the top actress, Xiaoku Xian. Wrong. The current Xiaoku Xian hadn't received the Best Actress award yet, but the award ceremony was around the corner. Xiaoku Xian was a classic example of someone who relied on her looks to succeed in the entertainment industry. She was one of those pretty and flirtatious sorts of domineering women and had always been very popular. Unfortunately, because of her image, she didn't even have a decent award under her belt, and she was already in her 30s. Thus, she was criticized by many and was always insulted by female stars. Yi Wanwan remembered this was the year she received the Golden Orchid Award for Best Actress. In her past life, she was quite fond of Xiaoku Xian. Although she was flirtatious and had numerous boyfriends before, she was one of the few celebrities who were real. Fine, she was just envious of the 3,000 harems of Xiaoku Xian. All her boyfriends were super handsome hunks, and they were all younger than her with good looks and bodies. Previously, there was a fan who begged her to discuss tips on how to get men, saying the discussion would definitely play on the VIP channels for the entire year. At the moment, Xiaoku Xian sized up the young man next to Han Xianyu wantonly and wasn't trying in the slightest to mask her interest. Xianyu, is this your friend? Why haven't I seen him before? Why haven't you introduced such a handsome little DD to me before? Han Xianyu lifted his head to look at her, then replied bluntly, "This is my friend, Yi Bai, but he already has a girlfriend." When her motives exposed on the spot, Xiaoku Xian giggled but didn't appear too abashed. She glanced at him coquettishly. So what if he has a girlfriend? Jie's not interested in being his girlfriend. Han Xianyu rubbed his wet head with the towel, glanced at her, then said calmly, "That's right. You only want to bed him." Xiaoku Xian pouted and protested playfully. "You're so mean." Han Xianyu replied, "Xian Jie, he's not that sort of person. Don't get any ideas." Right after Han Xianyu said that, the young man next to him said, "Eh? How am I not that sort of person? I most definitely am." Han Xianyu. Yuanwan looked at Xiaoku Xian and a smile spread across her face. "Does Jie like me?" Xiaoku Xian's heart was instantly stirred by that pair of sparkling eyes. She had seen many hunks before, and many of them were fresh and young. But this particular boy was too attractive. The boys she dated before were top-notch hunks, but after a while, there wasn't much excitement to them. It was like they were all clones from a production line. But this Yi Bai, he sat there alone, and although he was physically at a noisy party, he seemed deep in thoughts, like he was lost in a bamboo forest, contented and unaffected. He drank by himself, and also, he had a sense of desolation that extended beyond his age. She was instantly attracted to him from afar, and she wasn't the only one at this party who felt this way. Han Xianyu's head was filled with black lines as he looked at Yi Bai, whose personality had suddenly changed completely. He then coughed lightly and said, "Sorry, he's drunk. I never expected this guy would be like this when he's drunk. No wonder his girlfriend doesn't like him drinking. This is too dangerous." However, Yi Wanwan was beyond Han Xianyu's control already. She completely ignored what he said and voluntarily started chatting with Xiaoku Xian. "Jie, how about letting me read your palm?" Xiaoku Xian got excited as she sat closer to him and asked with interest, "You even know how to read palms?" "I'm pretty good at it." When the young man looked into her eyes, his pair of peach blossom eyes seemed to have the ability to blow a petal away. Xiaoku Xian encountered many of these low tricks to get girls before, but somehow, when this Yi Bai did it, she didn't find it cliched or lame. Thus, she stretched her red manicured hand out. "Oh? Then tell me, who will the Golden Orchid Best Actress Award go to this time? Is it me?" Yi Wanwan held Xiaoku Xian's hand and put on a show, looking at the lines on her palm earnestly, then said, "The leading actress award this year obviously belongs to you, Jie." As she watched the Golden Orchid Award ceremony for this year out of boredom in her previous life, she could easily recall the recipients for each award. Xiaoku Xian giggled and whined, feigning unhappiness. "So insincere with your flattery. Everyone knew the hottest star right now was a different famous actress." The young man said with all seriousness, "I'm not trying to please you, Jie. You're really the recipient of this year's Golden Orchid Best Actress Award. Not only did I manage to predict that you'll be the best actress, I also predicted the other recipients. The Best Actor Award will go to Senior Li Zhongyi. The Best Supporting Actress will be Lin Jiayin. The Best Supporting Actor will be Meng Liangzhu, and the Best Newcomer will be..." Xiaoku Xian couldn't help but burst out in laughter. "PFFF, I finally understand what tongue-in-cheek means." Han Xianyu was totally helpless as he listened to Yi Bai spouting nonsense. Yi Bai sensed that they didn't believe his words, so he said, "Jie, I'm serious. If you don't believe me, let's have a wager. Sure. What do you want to bet on? Xiaoko Xian giggled. The young man's eyes shifted slightly. If there are any mistakes in the award winners I mentioned just now, then I lose. If I lose, Jejia, you may do anything you want of me, but if I win, so what if you win? I'll get a kiss from Jejia then. Xiaoko Xian was taken aback at first, then she blushed scarlet red. You, cheeky. Han Xianyu watched as Yi Bai kept flirting. His face turned almost completely black, and his head started hurting as he supported it with his hand. Yi Bai, stop messing around. Bro, did you forget that you have a girlfriend? Where are your morals? Han Xianyu was totally flabbergasted. This was the first time he witnessed Xiaoko Xian blush in her entire history of interacting with all sorts of fresh meat. Since Han Xianyu invited Yi Bai along, he was worried he'd go too far, so he quickly helped Yi Bai up and left. Han Xianyu drove towards the apartment while Yi Wanwan sat in the passenger's seat next to him. Yi Bai seemed drunk since his gaze remained glued to his face. Han Xianyu thought he drank too much and felt unwell, so he drove faster and tilted his head slightly to glance at the young man next to him. Are you okay? Do you need to puke? I have garbage bags in the car. In the passenger seat, the young man's gaze slowly returned to focus as he kept staring at Han Xianyu's face. Then he laughed suddenly and the light from his dazzling smile diffused into the atmosphere. His eyes were like thousands of white flowers blossoming. Ah, why would I feel like puking when I'm looking at such a beautiful face? Screech. Han Xianyu lost control of his steering for a moment, making the car skid and form an S on the road. After quite a shock, they finally arrived at the apartment. Han Xianyu quickly helped Yi Bai to his doorstep and couldn't wait to throw him into the house. This guy is really bad at drinking. Never mind if he got drunk and flirted with girls, but he doesn't even let men off. The image of that smile Yi Bai gave him in the car just now surfaced in his head, and his heart skipped a few beats. This troublemaker. Initially, he thought Yi Bai's girlfriend was too strict with him, but now, he really sympathized with her. Han Xianyu sighed as he helped Yi Bai out of the lift and was about to step forward when he suddenly saw a man standing by the door. It's that Aju, Yi Bai's friend. The man seemed to have come straight from a black tie affair as he was dressed in a plain black formal suit. The perfect tailoring outlined his slender waist, and he emanated a cold vibe from his eyes. His high nose, deep eyes as dark as ink, and lips stained with a light cherry color came together to form a perfectly stunning face. As the atmosphere was uncomfortably chilly, the whole space suddenly felt really cramped. That man's bone-breaking cold gaze landed on him, making him feel guilty as if he'd just been caught for committing adultery. Han Xianyu was in a daze for a second before returning to his senses. He quickly said, "Cough, Mr. C. Were you looking for Yi Bai? This guy's drunk." The moment Han Xianyu said that, Yi Bai's eyes lit up as bright as day as he pushed him aside and walked towards the man standing opposite. Beauty? Han Xianyu. Be beauty? You called a big man beauty? Aren't you afraid he'll punch you? Han Xianyu wanted to stop him, but Yi Bai was like a wild horse let loose. His eyes looked as if they just spotted some prey and were focused on the strong and immortally handsome man in front of him. Beauty? Have we met somewhere before? Han Xianyu's mouth started twitching when he heard that. It was the classic line used to hit on girls. Si Han was definitely able to keep his composure better than himself after being hit on by this guy. Si Han continued standing there with a frozen expression. It was terrifying just being in the same space as him. Yet the young man hadn't seemed to notice the danger ahead of him, so he kept teasing Si Han delightedly. Beautiful little GG. I think we have an affinity with each other. Why don't you let me read your palm? Huh? Han Xianyu's head was filled with black lines. Again? Yi Bai didn't wait for the man in front of him to agree. Right under Han Xianyu's speechless gaze, he grasped the man's hand. How is this reading his palm? This guy simply caressed the man's hand a few times. After Yi Bai appeared satisfied with the reading he got from Si Han's palm, He kept up the act and predicted, "Little Gigi, I see you're shrouded in a favorable aura and you possess the supreme power of an emperor. But what a pity. Your marriage line is thin and faint. You're destined to have a disastrous wedding, and you'll be alone for eternity. If you wish to break the curse, there's only one way." The young man's face was very grave. When Han Xianyu witnessed this, he was almost convinced Yi Bai really knew how to read palms and listened eagerly for the solution to break the curse. "Oh, what is it?" the man asked, expressionless. The young man stroked his hand and replied simultaneously, don't worry, little Gigi. You don't have to be nervous. You're just lacking me in your life. So sleep with me once and you'll be fine." See Han. Han Xianyu almost choked, as if anyone would believe your bullshit. After they both returned to their respective apartments, Han Xianyu shook his head and paced around his living room anxiously. In the end, he walked to his bedroom and glued his ear to the wall, trying to eavesdrop on any conversation going on in the neighboring apartment. But the sound insulation was too good, and he couldn't hear a thing. Could something happen between the two of them? Now he finally understood why Yi Bai's friend didn't seem very straight. Was he forced to be gay by that guy's relentless flirting? Next door, Yi Wanwan was like a big bad wolf, dragging Si Han and slowly leading him into the bedroom. "Beauty, why don't you join me in looking at the stars and the moon tonight? We'll talk about poetry and the philosophy of life. I promise I won't do anything to you." As she spoke, she simultaneously pulled the man to the bed. Si Han wasn't in the mood to play, and he brushed away the little hands getting busy with his collar. His voice was frozen without a tinge of warmth as he said, "If it wasn't me tonight, would you bring him to bed instead?" After Yi Wanwan's hands were brushed aside, she could sense that he was angry, so she stroked him lightly, lifted her head and grinned. "That's impossible, little Gigi. You're the only one for me. I'll only sleep with you alone." Si Han took a deep breath, looking like he really wanted to strangle her, but also wanted to bury her in his embrace at the same time. He bent down and forcefully bit down on her lips while his big palms unfastened the buttons of her top, one by one. But then, something he touched didn't feel right. He looked down and realized her entire chest-to-waist area was bound tightly. The man furrowed his brows and slowly helped her out of the binding. Although Yi Wanwan was already drunk, she still had the ability to assume her male identity. She quickly freed herself and pinned Si Han down on the bed. Her watery peach blossom eyes blinked and her hands pressed on his palms. Beauty, don't be naughty." When she pinned him down, her wig fell off and her fine black hair was let loose. Si Han stared at her flushed little face, her eyes sparkling like stars, her hair falling on her shoulders and the delicate collarbones peeking out of her top. His eyes darkened instantly, and his big palms grasped the girl's waist as he gritted his teeth and exclaimed, "Look carefully, who am I?" Yi Wanwan laid on Si Han's chest and stared at him as if there was only him in the entire universe. Her voice slowly recovered its girly, soft and sweet tone as she said, "I can see you clearly. You're a beauty, my little Gigi, my baby." She rubbed against his neck lightly and her voice became even gentler. "Baby brought me clothes when I was cold, fed me porridge. Baby has a white tiger. I love baby." Seeing the gentleness and warmth in her eyes and feeling the softness on his neck, Si Han was stunned. "Damn it, woman, you think I would let you off just like that?" The next morning, Yi Wanwan realized she was lying in bed, had changed into clean pajamas, and the wig on her head was gone. She had returned to being a girl somehow, and she was in so much shock that she immediately stumbled out of bed. She drank over her limits last night and couldn't recall what happened at all. She only remembered going to a pool party with Han Xianyu. Did Han Xianyu find out my secret? Yi Wanwan put on her slippers and rushed out of the bedroom. Then, she saw Si Han drinking a cup of coffee in the living room. After she saw Si Han, Yi Wanwan heaved a sigh of relief and her heart calmed down. "Baby, weren't you overseas?" "Oh no, why is it so late already? I have to go to the office." Yi Wanwan saw the time and quickly got dressed. Si Han looked suspiciously at her without saying a word, an aura of discontentment emanating from his body. After disguising her looks all these years, Yi Wanwan was very adept at it and was able to put on her disguise very quickly. Compared to the exotic makeup she put on daily in the past, dressing up as a man was much simpler to her. All she had to do was draw coarser eyebrows and shadows around her face to make it look more masculine and three-dimensional, and she was done. Before, she sold all her messy outfits in one go on a second-hand website and exchanged them for all sorts of menswear. As she headed to the office, Yi Wanwan donned a more formal Western suit with a white shirt underneath. The collar had vintage embroidery on it, and a rose pattern was sewn on the chest pocket. Also, she covered her overly dazzling and attractive eyes with her bangs slightly. When she came out of her room again, Yi Wanwan transformed from being the girl who just woke up in a daze to an upper-class, elegant little prince from medieval Europe. Baby, where did you put my insole last night? Yi Wanwan asked anxiously. Although she seemed very small when she stood next to Si Han, she actually wasn't very short. But her insoles helped her look more manly, so she couldn't go without them. Yi Wanwan looked around for her insoles and took a peek at Si Han. She was sharp and noticed that Si Han had bags under his eyes. She couldn't help but think, Si Han didn't sleep well last night? Did my sleep in second skill fail? What was even more shocking was she noticed something on Si Han's neck from the corner of her eyes. In the next second, Yi Wanwan charged over and pulled open Si Han's collar. Fuck, baby, you actually slept around behind my back? The iciness in Si Han's eyes finally shattered. Even his voice was extremely menacing as he said, enunciating each word carefully, I slept around? Yi Wanwan pointed at the hickeys on his neck and unfastened his buttons. You're still trying to deny it? Look at the hickeys on your neck, and here and some here too. There's even a bite here. It's a complete eyesore. I never imagined that you would be this sort of person. Si Han's face was as black as the underside of a pot. He pushed her hand aside and fastened his buttons, obviously pissed off. If I knew she'd act this way, I wouldn't have let her off so easily last night. At that moment, the doorbell suddenly rang. Yi Wanwan shot a look at Si Han, then went to get the door. Han Xianyu stood at the door. After seeing Yi Wanwan's clothes, a hint of surprise clearly flashed across his eyes. Then he stretched his head inside and said, Morning, I bought breakfast. Do you want to eat together? Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. Yi Wanwan looked at the bags in Han Xianyu's hands and didn't want him to get suspicious, so her face brightened as she pulled the door open to let him in. Thank you. Why are you up so early when you're on leave? Han Xianyu rubbed his nose and didn't know how to respond. How can I tell him that I stuck my ear to the wall the entire night, so I didn't sleep at all? Nothing happened to these two, right? With that thought, Han Xianyu entered and immediately saw the man sitting at the dining table with his frozen face and messy collar. Han Xianyu turned to Yi Wanwan immediately with an inexplicable expression. He moved closer to her ear and whispered, trying to probe, Yi Bai, last night, you didn't do anything to your friend, did you? Yi Wanwan was confused. My friend? Are you referring to Aju? What did I do to him? Han Xianyu noticed she'd completely forgotten what she was like last night and was speechless. Don't you remember? You were drunk last night and started hitting on him, calling him a beauty, a little GG, and insisted on reading his palm. You pulled his hand and caressed it for a long time before telling him that he'd be alone for life, and even said he's lacking you in his life. The curse would be lifted only if he slept with you. Then you forcefully dragged him into the apartment. I couldn't stop you and was worrying about you guys the whole night. Yi Wanwan, what? Han Xianyu's words was like a 400-kilogram sledgehammer, slamming down on Yi Wanwan's head forcefully, making her see stars, and the world was spinning out of control around her. What did you just say? Yi Wanwan stared at him blankly. Han Xianyu coughed lightly. You really don't remember, huh? While Yi Wanwan and Han Xianyu were whispering, Si Han could still hear them clearly. After rearranging his collar meticulously, he looked at her with frosty eyes. Yi Wanwan swallowed and didn't dare to meet Si Han's gaze. She continued staring at Han Xianyu and said, "How could that be? Why would I do something like that? I have only my girlfriend in my heart. Stop talking nonsense." Han Xianyu looked at her helplessly. "I'm talking nonsense? Not only did you hit on your friend last night, you even hit on Xinjia. Don't you remember?" The moment Han Xianyu said that, Si Han's face turned uglier. "Oh, great. Who's Xinjia?" Yi Wanwan was stupefied. Han Xianyu. Xiaoku Xian. Yi Wanwan. Best Actress Xiao. Xiaoku Xian? My goddess? Han Xianyu helped her refresh her memory. Xinjia was quite interested in you. So in order to help you escape the situation, I told her you were taken and weren't the sleazy type. But in the end, you turned on me and said you were exactly that type and also wanted to read Xinjia's palm. You told her she would win this year's Golden Orchid Best Actress Award. Not only did you predict that she would win Best Actress, you even predicted the Best Actor, Best Supporting Actress and Actor and Newcomer, then you made a bet with her. Bet on what? Yi Wanwan had a bad feeling about this. Han Xianyu glanced at her. You said if she won, then she could do whatever she wanted to you, and if you won, she had to give you a kiss. Yi Wanwan. This can't be true. How could I be such an immoral person? Just as the world crumbled down around Yi Wanwan, Han Xianyu looked deep into her eyes and then said, "You even hit on me." Yi Wanwan. Yi Wanwan turned to look at Si Han mournfully. "Daddy, please listen to my explanation. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon." Han Xianyu had no idea his words had given Yi Wanwan away completely and pressed on. "You simply flirted with Xinjia and me, but your friend was in a more terrible plight. A big man like him was taken advantage of by you. You didn't really do anything to him, right?" Yi Wanwan. "So all those marks on Si Han's body were caused by me? Stop talking. Leave me alone." Han Xianyu sensed that something was off in the atmosphere, so he left after giving her the breakfast. In a flash, there was only Yi Wanwan and Si Han alone in the apartment. Yi Wanwan debated between rushing out and begging him for forgiveness. After a very long time, she didn't dare to just leave things like that, so she walked carefully towards Si Han. "Baby, I was wrong. I was the one messing around. I'm immoral. I'm the eyesore. Shit, what should I do? I know I violated the agreement, but to err is human. Nobody is infallible. Everyone makes mistakes, everyone." Yi Wanwan couldn't come up with any more phrases, so she simply used this. "Wanwan's your beloved little darling. So, can you give Wanwan a chance, please?" The man looked at her coldly with a faint smile. His feelings were obvious. Yi Wanwan knew she was in deep trouble this time, so she raised her hand and said, "I would like to file an appeal. Last night, Han Xianyu was kind enough to introduce me to some people in the entertainment industry when he brought me to a party. Baby, you know how parties are. You have to drink a little, and I wanted to just drink for show at first to maintain my persona, but I didn't expect to get drunk so easily. I have no recollection of what happened afterwards. I really didn't know I couldn't hold my liquor well." Seeing that Si Han had no reaction, Yi Wanwan became desperate. "Baby, why don't we do this? From today onwards, I'll be your sweet little pillow, anywhere and anytime. I'll be there whenever you feel like sleeping. What do you think?" Si Han gave her a sideways glance and said icily, "Isn't it more convenient if I locked you up in bed?" Yi Wanwan's little heart shivered when she heard that. She racked her brains and replied, "There's a difference. It's so boring if you lock me up in bed. If you don't, we can unlock many different positions. We can do it in the dormitory, office, home, car, outdoors. Am I right?" Si Han. Yi Wanwan hopped over. "Don't be mad anymore, all right? Though I was a little drunk and out of control, I was still faithful to you, and in the end, baby, you were the one I brought to bed. Even when I was under the influence and lost awareness, it was still within my innate abilities to choose you. What does this prove? It says I'm true to you, baby." The corners of Si Han's lips moved upwards slightly. Yi Wanwan saw his face relaxed and immediately took that as a good sign. Baby's the best. Si Han, did I say she's forgiven? He pinched her delicate chin and got dangerously close to her as he mouthed each word carefully. Yi Wanwan, you really think I'm so easily fooled? With that position, Yi Wanwan pecked Si Han on the cheek. No, no, baby, you're so clever and handsome. You're not easily fooled at all. It's just that you love me so much that you can't bear to bully me. Si Han, Wanwan's little class. In order to deal with the great devil, you must be shameless. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. At Dazzling Media, the news about an externally hired manager spread throughout the entire company. As expected, the senior managers were obviously unhappy. Never mind that he didn't climb his way up, but he was so young to boot. Why doesn't he choose to be a celebrity instead since he's so young and good-looking? Why must he be a manager? After all, being a manager and an artiste wasn't the same. The earlier one debuted as an artiste the better, but a manager required lots of experience and extensive networks. Most of the managers started out as assistants or were in charge of marketing. They normally didn't have an artiste under them without working at least 3 to 5 years, so there were only a few managers in the industry who were under 30 years old. But the older employees knew in their hearts that Chairman Chu was already wary of this dictator, Zhou Bin, who held power over all the artistes. Thus, Chairman Chu gave Yi Bai extensive powers and made sure everyone agreed to cooperate with him. At the moment, everybody was just waiting to see what would happen. Nobody dared to choose a team, but it was obvious that not many people had a good feeling about Yi Bai. Zhou Bin had been rebuked by Yi Bai in front of Chairman Chu, and Yi Bai seemed capable on the surface, but Chairman Chu couldn't control what happened in private. This young guy didn't have any background, no backers, no experience, and the artiste he chose was way past his prime. How could he fight against Zhou Bin? There was chaos in the film studio. A group of newcomers were having their photos taken for publicity purposes. Many of them weren't even in their 20s yet. The youngest was only 16. All of them were at the age when they were freshest. Luo Chen arrived very early that morning. He still wore a plain t-shirt and jeans with a pair of old and washed-out sneakers as he waited silently in a corner. It was currently 9:10 a.m., 10 minutes past the time his manager told him yesterday. At that moment, an attractive-looking artiste was joking with some people and wasn't looking straight as he accidentally bumped into Luo Chun. Seeing that the person in his way was Luo Chun, the artiste's face suddenly turned ugly. Luo Chun, this artiste, Lin Hao, was under Zhou Bin as well. As his manager was the strongest in the company and the film he recently acted in was very popular, Lin Hao was in the limelight and a few newcomers crowded around him, trying to curry favor with him. News of the incident in Zhou Bin's office yesterday already spread. Everyone knew the new manager chose an unpopular artiste under Zhou Bin, and rumor had it that Zhou Bin refused to let him go and used Lin Hao to switch with Luo Chun. What's worse was that the new manager refused to budge as he thought Lin Hao wasn't good enough, making Lin Hao the butt of the joke in the entire office. When he saw Luo Chun, Lin Hao naturally had a rage boiling inside him. He rubbed his chin and sized him up with a threatening gaze. "What are you doing here?" "My manager asked me to wait here." Luo Chun seemed to be accustomed to receiving this kind of treatment as he didn't move and stayed put as he replied expressionlessly. Lin Hao laughed out loud. Manager? That little Adonis who just entered the company? The newcomers next to Lin Hao also chimed in and sneered to please Lin Hao. Yo, I wondered who that was. Is he the future star the new manager handpicked? He is backing, so no wonder he's so arrogant now. He can't make a comeback just by changing his manager, can he? Even Chu Ji couldn't groom this garbage, yet he's still thinking of making a comeback. Lin Hao crossed his arms and laughed. Don't say that, guys. He's our senior after all since he debuted 3 years ago. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. The entertainment industry was really just a huge display of vanity. No matter how early you debuted, you'd be at the lowest level if you were unpopular. Like an ant, anyone could crush you. Luo Chen knew his rank very well after these 3 years. At first, he even tried to rebel and stand up for himself, but after a while, he became numb to all the mockery. Lin Hao glanced at the small-time artiste next to him, and he immediately got the message. He knocked his shoulder straight into Luo Chen and said, "Sorry, we're about to start filming. Please leave. Don't be a nuisance here." Before, Luo Chen might have just left without a word, but thinking about what his manager's warning from last night, he stopped in his tracks. The small-time artiste mockingly said, "Don't you understand the words of a human? I've never met anyone so shameless. Have you gone nuts from your dreams of becoming famous, senior? Weren't you delighted that you managed to hug a big thigh? Why do you still want to freeload on the filming of small-time artistes like us?" Noticing the ruckus, the cameraman yelled in annoyance, "Those who have nothing to do with this, get out. Don't disturb everyone else." The small-time artiste sneered, "Heard that? Crawl back to your owner." Luo Chen clenched his fists and turned around, ready to leave. However, the moment he turned around, a warm palm pressed onto his shoulders. The person appeared unhurried as he walked very leisurely and showed an indifferent expression. "Yo, it's so lively in here." Seeing Yi Bai appear, the arrogant small-time artiste turned pale. He glanced at Lin Hao. After all, this Yi Bai was an important person to Chairman Chu. Lin Hao's face darkened as he glared at the main culprit, who embarrassed him so thoroughly. "Great manager Yi, please look after your artiste carefully. Don't let him go around barking by himself." Yi Wanwan wanted to laugh. Even if she met Luo Chen only once, she knew how quiet he was. Yet his guy claimed Luo Chen was the one barking. Yi Wanwan smiled. How I take care of my artist isn't important, but shutting 1 or 2 people out, that's a piece of cake." The moment Yi Wanwan said that, a raging fire blazed in Lin Hao's eyes and he sneered, "Shut me out? You? Who do you think you are? You're waving a chicken feather as a token of authority. You really think so highly of yourself? I'm one of Binji's men. I don't think Yi Bai has the guts to touch me." Yi Wanwan still had that indifferent expression on her face. She looked suspiciously at the face that had gone through too many plastic surgeries, then casually made a call. "Hello? Chairman Chu?" Lin Hao, who looked fearless up until now, turned totally pale the instant he saw Yi Wanwan call Chairman Chu. Yi Wanwan continued in a very relaxed tone. "Haha, Chairman Chu, it's nothing much. I just wanted to shut someone out, so I'm asking you to extend your powers." "There's this dumb guy who said I was waving a chicken feather as a token of authority. Oh, I don't have to go through you? Just shut him out if I want to?" Hearing that, Lin Hao couldn't maintain his composure anymore and his whole body started trembling. And the artistes who mocked Luo Chen together with Lin Hao didn't dare to make a sound. They collectively retreated backwards silently, afraid they'd be dragged down with him. Yi Wanwan curled her lips, looked at the pale-faced Lin Hao, then continued, "But he's an artist under Director Zhou. What? I can shut off any artist who's below B-list? All right, thank you so much, Chairman Chu." Upon hearing that, Lin Hao couldn't hold it in anymore and rushed to Yi Bai. "Yi, Manager Yi, I was wrong. I was rash. I shouldn't have been rude towards you. Please, please give me one more chance. I won't dare be so disrespectful next time." As Lin Hao panicked, he didn't show a single shred of arrogance. Yi Bai's phone call was like a hammer, knocking him to his senses instantly. Since he rose in popularity after his show, many newcomers to the industry attempted to get closer to him to suck up to him, and it got to his head. He forgot he was just a C-list artist. On the other hand, Yi Bai was someone appointed by Chairman Chu. Even Binji had been avoiding trouble recently and didn't dare go against Yi Bai. Yi Bai already consulted Chairman Chu, and Binji was even willing to switch Lin Hao for Luo Chen yesterday. Today, Binji could give Lin Hao up completely to save himself. "I could really be shut off any time." Yi Wanwan forced a smile and looked straight into Lin Hao's eyes. I'm not the one you should be apologizing to. Lin Hao's face darkened as he clenched his fists tightly. Finally, he turned to Luo Chan and said, enunciating each word carefully, Senior Luo Chan, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. After that, he immediately turned to Yi Wanwan anxiously. Was that all right, Yi Ji? Please explain to Chairman Chu. I've learned from my mistakes. Yi Wanwan was finally satisfied, so she took her phone out and placed it directly in front of Lin Hao. Everyone, including Lin Hao, saw the contacts directory on the screen. Yi Wanwan didn't make a call at all just now. Lin Hao opened his mouth, dumbfounded, and he stared blankly at Yi Wanwan's phone. After he came to his senses over what happened, his entire face was the color of pig's liver. I was fooled. This damn Adonis, he actually fooled me like a monkey. Lin Hao's lungs nearly exploded and he was about to curse, but his gaze met Yi Bai's ice-cold eyes. This was just a warning. In other words, if Lin Hao dared to provoke Yi Bai again, he would really make the call. And if he really made that call, with that thought, Lin Hao didn't dare to let out a single sound. He pushed away from the crowd and left in a huff. After everyone else saw the tactics of this new manager, none of them dared to protest, and they immediately scattered like birds. After all, compared to Lin Hao, they were even more unimportant. Luo Chun looked around the suddenly empty film studio, then looked at his manager who was still very relaxed. Luo Chen's shoulders still felt the warmth from his touch. He was already used to all this mockery, but this was the very first time someone actually stood up for someone as worthless as him. At this moment, after witnessing this attack from Yi Bai, this new manager who had just taken office, the cameraman was afraid he'd become the target of Yi Bai's second attack. He quickly wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and explained, So sorry, Yi Ji. You made an appointment yesterday, but because these newcomers had urgent publicity needs and needed their photos taken ASAP, I let them go first. Yi Bai didn't seem to have the intention of punishing him as he pulled a chair, sat down and commanded, Let's start. All right. The cameraman heaved a sigh of relief and quickly ushered everyone to get ready. At the same time, Luo Chun was also led into the makeup room to change his clothes and get styled. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. When Luo Chun walked out of the makeup room, everyone's eyes lit up. Before, his hair was too long, so Luo Chun looked a little disheveled. Now, his black hair was short and his fringe had been trimmed, revealing a bright and full forehead and a pair of glistening eyes. It was unlike those deliberately drawn, European, and thick double eyelids that looked dull and lifeless once makeup was removed. The outer corners of Luo Chen's eyes were sloped upwards. Like people in the olden days, his double eyelids were extremely natural and his thin lips were the shade of cherry blossoms, making them look extremely kissable. His skin was perfectly smooth without a single pore visible. The clothes Luo Chan was wearing was requested by Yi Wanwan. It wasn't too over the top. He wore a classic white-collared top, and the only design on it was the star embroidered on his collar. For his bottoms, he wore a pair of black pants. This look was neat and simple, matching Luo Chen's slightly cool and distant temperament. It was just like the ignorant yet hopeful figure in everyone's teenage memory. No wonder Zhou Enbin didn't want to give Luo Chen up even after 3 years. Luo Chen was simply too pure, and in the entertainment industry, this was extremely hard to come by. Since he hadn't had such a drastic makeover for a long time, Luo Chun was a little uncomfortable with the staff, and Yi Wanwan sizing him up. Yi Ji, what do you think? Is it all right? The makeup artist asked. Not bad. Yi Wanwan nodded. Most importantly, Luo Chun has a good foundation. His skin's very soft, and I didn't have to do much. Although the makeup artist was just saying all this to curry favor, she also genuinely meant it at the same time. After so many years of being a makeup artist, she could easily tell with one look whether someone had undergone plastic surgery or not, and she was sure that this face of Luo Chen's was totally natural. In all fairness, Yi Bai did have quite good taste. Judging by Luo Chen's face, there really weren't many artists who could compare to him. In all of Dazzling, only Gong Su could really match up to him. At this moment, the cameraman adjusted the lighting and walked towards them to ask, E.g., may I know what we're shooting today? Shooting a video, Yu Wanwan replied. The cameraman was under the assumption he'd be taking publicity photos for Luo Chun and wasn't prepared to shoot a video. He was somewhat taken aback as he asked, shooting a video? What's it about? Luo Chen, who was standing at the side quietly, also turned to look out of curiosity. Yi Wanwan opened a document from her phone and showed it to Luo Chen. Do you still remember this line? Luo Chen looked at her phone and in the next second, he was totally stunned. It was a line from Terrifying Dragon. Remember? How could I not? I remember every single line of Terrifying Dragon clearly, without a single word missing. He was truly passionate about acting and loved being able to take on the roles of different characters. While he was acting in Terrifying Dragon, it was the happiest period of his life. During those 3 years after the show, the cast, crew members, and sword fights often appeared in his dreams. That was the only precious memory he had ever since he debuted. Remember? Luo Chun replied in a trance. We'll film this part today. When Luo Chen heard that, he shuddered. They wanted him to reenact this part again. Yi Wanwan didn't waste any time. She leaned back on the seat and said directly, if you don't have any issues, let's start right away. I'll give you 3 minutes to get into character. Luo Chen was stunned for a while before recovering his composure. He quickly made preparations while the cameraman hurriedly got his equipment ready. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. You hate it for bringing you bad luck? Let me tell you, everything bad that happened to you wasn't because of your face, but it was because you were weak and incompetent. Meng Liang received the Best Actor award when he was around 18 years old. As his mother fell ill, he went MIA for 6 years, then came back only when he was 24 years old. Yet, he still managed to get another award as Best Actor. Li Zhongyi was acting in supporting male roles for 30 years, and got his first role as the male lead only when he was 53 and immediately shot to fame. Xiaoko Xian was ridiculed ever since she debuted, but she kept swimming against the current and is making her way up, not showing any signs of weakness at all. Today, she's nominated for the Golden Orchid's Best Actress Award. You've only lost 3 years of your life and were treated unfairly, yet you think it's the end of your life? With those words, Yi Wanwan's expression froze. In a place like the entertainment industry, if you want to reach the top, you have to go through things hundreds, maybe even 1,000 times worse than this while under immense pressure. If you're not strong enough, then I'm very sorry, but I suggest you leave the entertainment industry soon. I won't waste my time on an artist who doesn't have any conviction. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. In a moment, the atmosphere in the film studio solidified into a big block of ice. The person who was normally very easygoing and was always so relaxed like a good-for-nothing man from a wealthy family suddenly became a demon. A terrifying aura emanated from all around him. Even the cameraman and other workers were dumbstruck by this sudden explosion of dreadful aura, much less Luo Chun, who was in the heart of the typhoon. Luo Chun was trembling. There was no color on his face at all. His thin lips were in a straight line, and his entire body almost combusted into flames by the deafening tongue lashing he got. He really wished he could disappear into the air. Yi Wanwan curbed her anger slightly, but the coldness on her face did not lessen as she said, Now, this is your last chance. If you keep this up, our collaboration shall end here. When Luo Chen heard the last 5 words, his eyes constricted and he lifted his head immediately. Am I going to be given up on once again? His contract with Dazzling hadn't ended yet. If Yibai gave up on him now, his management would return to Zhou Wenbin's hands. Yi Wanwan swept her gaze over the workers. Everyone, get ready. All the workers were stunned for a long time before returning to their senses. The cameraman quickly adjusted the angle. The lighting director adjusted the light accordingly, and the makeup artist rushed over to wipe Luo Chen's sweat and retouched his makeup. Seeing the boy's pale white face, the makeup artist sympathized with him but couldn't help him. The entertainment industry was a place where the weak fell prey to the strong. Although what Yi Bai said was pretty harsh, it was the truth. Very soon, everything was in place and the light shone on Luo Chen alone. Everyone's eyes were on that boy in white top standing in the middle of the spotlight. Luo Chen stood there vacant and lifeless, unable to free himself from Yu Wanwan's words. He looked so fragile, like he could break with just one touch. It feels as if I was abandoned by the entire world. Begin. Following Yu Wanwan's order to begin, the red light on the camera started flashing. Everyone held their breath subconsciously. 1 second went by, 2 seconds went by, 3 seconds went by. Luo Chen still stood there like he'd lost his soul, not moving or speaking at all. After a few seconds, there was still no reaction from Luo Chen. He was like a lifeless puppet. The makeup artist shook her head, feeling sorry for him, while the cameraman also sighed and prepared to turn his camera off. The face of the young man sitting on the seat opposite was gradually turning frosty as well, ending the unendurable dead silence. Yi Wanwan finally spoke up. Since this is the case. The moment Yi Wanwan spoke, a low and hoarse laugh resounded in the huge filming studio. Ha! Under the spotlight, Luo Chen lowered his gaze and suddenly let out a chuckle. Luo Chen shortly raised his head. His clear eyes swept across everyone in the room. It was a sin for me to be born. My entire life was a sin. The teenager's clear gaze was like a trapped beast raging in an attempt to charge out of its cage. It was as if he was using all his energy to suppress the surging feelings in him. I, Lin Luo Chen, haven't done anything untoward to any of you, yet each one you, all of you, are aggressively forcing me to my doom. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. I've been kind towards people my entire life, yet everyone has cheated and insulted me. I have a clear conscience in heaven and earth, yet this heaven and earth also despised and hated me. With those words, the teenager suddenly started laughing. His smile was like a blossoming flower with thorns around it. He was simply standing in the film studio, but it felt as if there was a strong wind howling crazily around him. His clean and innocent face was stained with enormous sentiment, and he stirred up strong emotions in everyone. A little madness leaked out of his gloomy eyes as he said, "So, from today onwards, I'm the only one who can stop myself. There shall be a massacre. I won't spare any humans. I'll kill every human on this earth. The world denies me. I shall destroy this universe." The moment he said this last line, it was as if something terrifying had broken free from its shackles and escaped from his body in that split second, howling and rushing towards the ninth celestial sphere. Silence. Everyone in the film studio was flabbergasted. They stared blankly at Luo Chen, who seemed as if he had become another person completely. He was obviously still the same person. Yet that face, how could it become so terrifying? An indeterminate amount of time had passed when everyone finally regained their senses and realized that Luo Chen was acting just now. He was reenacting a classic scene from Terrifying Dragon when the big triad boss turned dark. It was too earth-shaking. Terrifying Dragon was a sensational hit before. Almost everyone watched it, and what Luo Chen reenacted made everyone recall that scene from Terrifying Dragon instantly. At this moment, present-day Luo Chen was akin to the teenager Lin Luo Chen from the show who was also forced to his doom. Even though Luo Chen was wearing a modern outfit, the outcome of his acting wasn't inferior to the original scene at all. It was even more moving watching it now. However, with the manager's residual hostility still lingering, everyone still didn't dare to utter a word. Their eyes all turned towards him sitting silently on the chair. Luo Chen's performance was so exceptional he'll be able to pass, right? Luo Chen calmed down a little before coming out of character. The aura around him dissipated instantly, and he was back to his usual self. He stared uneasily at his manager. His body was tense as he stood stiffly on the spot. It was as if he was standing there waiting for his final judgment. After a moment of silence, Yu Wanwan slowly stood up. Under everyone's gaze, she slowly made her way towards the teenager. As she got closer, The teenager got more and more nervous and stiff. Even his breathing almost stopped from looking at the manager's cold expression. Finally, Yuanwan stood directly in front of the teenager. She stretched out her hand and touched the teenager's soft black hair, and her tone was like melting ice as she spoke gently. "See, you can do a good job, right?" Luo Chen's face went blank. His bright eyes were wide open, and in the next second, tears started streaming down his beautiful face as he looked down and sobbed silently. Yuanwan didn't expect this reaction at all, and her hand in the teenager's hair stiffened up. Did I overdo it? Why is he crying? I actually made him cry. Was I too fierce? Was I really fierce just now?" Yuanwan's heart was pulled into chaos, but she had to maintain her dignity and persona, so she expressionlessly passed a handkerchief to him. She said coldly, "Why are you crying? Real men don't cry this easily." Luo Chen choked with sobs, nodded, then took the handkerchief from her carefully as wiped the tears off quickly. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. In the office, "Do you have any background in martial arts?" Yi Wanwan asked. Luo Chen pressed his lips a little. But before, he got some training in order to film Terrifying Dragon, but that was 3 years ago after all. Yi Wanwan passed him a timetable. "You're probably unfamiliar with it since you haven't practiced it for so long, so I've arranged martial arts training sessions for you. Just focus on practicing with the master these next few days. Don't bother with anything else, and most importantly, don't bother with those unimportant people. A lion never turns its head to a dog's barking." Luo Chan nodded seriously and unquestioningly took the timetable. He didn't ask why his manager was forcing him to go for martial arts training when other managers signed their artists up to sing and dance. He also didn't question why Yi Wanwan made him do the filming today. Seeing how obedient Luo Chun was, Yi Wanwan's heart softened. "You can't afford a team for now, so just work with the timps in the company for now. In the future, you'll definitely have a team of your own." Her words seemed like a promise, but it was more like a prophecy that he'd be able to make it big. Luo Chen looked at the man's icy cold face, and a sense of warmth entered his dead heart. For the next while, Luo Chen led a mundane life. Aside from visiting his mom at the hospital, he only went to the company building for martial arts training. At the company, everyone waited in anticipation to see what Yi Bai was up to. In the end, nobody would have guessed that after Luo Chen filmed a video, he wouldn't do anything other than attending his training sessions every day. Why's Yi Bai making his artist attend martial arts training? Isn't it a waste of time? Is he being prepped to be a martial arts actor? He really has a weird way of doing things. Luo Chen ignored all the weird gazes and gossip around him and did whatever he needed to do every day. At the same time, Lin Hao took up a role as the main lead in a youth idol drama series. Being cast to play the role of the male lead after debuting not long ago was enough to make all the newcomers envious. Lin Hao's future was undoubtedly bright. Today, Lin Hao came to the office as usual with an entourage of newcomers and interns trying to curry his favor. When he walked past Luo Chen, Lin Hao stopped in his tracks and was no longer as sorry as he looked that day when Yuanwan fooled him. He was back to his arrogant self as he looked disdainfully at Luo Chen, like he was looking at a lowly ant. His face looked as if speaking a word to him would lower his status. Upon seeing Luo Chen's sweaty body, the group of little fresh meat started sneering at him. Senior Luo Chen's really pitiful. He went for training yet again. He's so hard-working. His future must be limitless. After all, he's following a dog manager who counts on Chairman Chu's support. Oops, wrong. I meant he's following a capable master. All the best, Senior Luo Chen. Senior Luo Chen, please give me your autograph. I'm afraid the next time we see you, we won't even be qualified to speak to you. Everyone started laughing once they were done with their mockery. Luo Chen wiped the sweat off his forehead. His gaze swept across everyone without emotion, and he left without a word. Upstairs, in Zhou Wenbin's office, Zhou Wenbin fiddled with the new antique that just arrived as he asked, "How's the young lad doing so far?" The plump manager quickly replied, "Binji, don't worry. He hasn't done anything yet. He's probably just bluffing, trying to act all mysterious. Don't let your guard down. Zhouwenbin looked disapprovingly at him. The man rubbed his hands together as he sucked up to him. Benji. Like what you said before, you're Benji after all and have been in the industry for over 20 years. There isn't anything you haven't seen before. A youngster like him can't fight against you. Chairman Chu will find out very soon that Dazzling has to rely on you. Zhouwenbin's mood lifted as he listened to all the flattery. He asked casually, "How's Gongsu doing recently?" Benji, don't worry. Gongsu's quite well behaved and hasn't caused any trouble so far. The scandal from before has subsided as well. He should be able to show up in a few days. In? Zhouwenbin blew the porcelain in his hands lightly and nodded, satisfied. Liked it? Take a second to support novels on Patreon. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.